To call to order the November 13th, 2024 meeting, Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Georgette, would you please call the roll?
Director Jakes.
Here.
Director Ortiz. Here.
Call
Director
to order
Lee.
the November 13th,
Chairman Barclay.
2024 meeting,
Director Edie.
Committee on Finance.
Director E is absent. Director Ja. Director Ja is absent. Director Requejo. Director Requejo is currently absent. Morning.
Good morning. Chair recognizes Director Ortiz.
Director Jakes, I have two matters that I would like to call, matters that I want to move this morning. First, I move that Director Requejo be allowed to participate in the meeting remotely due to work commitments that prevent him from participating in person.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that Director Roberto Requejo be allowed to participate in the meeting remotely. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. The second item, I move that we amend the agenda of the Finance, Audit, and Budget meeting and that we defer agenda items 4 through 6 until we have addressed agenda item number 11. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the agenda for the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee meeting for November 13th, 2024 be amended. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Director Requejo.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of October 9th, 2024. I have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Lee, that the meeting minutes from September 11th, October 9th, 2024 be approved. We will take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Director Requejo.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Tom McComb.
Morning, directors.
Tom.
Tom McCone, Chief Financial Officer. Give me a second to load up the report here. I think you can see the screen there. Yeah. Okay, I'm here to talk to you about the financial results for September. We're going to start with the system generated revenues. On the revenue side, what you can see here is that both fare and pass total was positive to budget. Both fare box and passes were positive to their budgeted levels and positive to where they were last year. So total positive to budget, 1.1 million for the month. The reduced fare box subsidy coming in on budget, non-fare box revenue slightly below budget. We've had positive investment income for the months that's offset by slightly lower advertising revenue. But total revenue for the month, 900,000 positive to budget, 1.8 million positive to where we were last year. So good results on the system generated revenue side for the month. And then if we look at year to date through September, what we'll see here is that a similar trend is continuing. Fare and pass total positive to budget by 4.4 million for the month year to date, and then also 19.4 million positive to last year's results. Total revenue, system generated revenue overall, 8.5 million positive to budget and 23.6 million higher than we were last year. So trends continuing from what we've seen in prior months there on the revenue side. On the expenses side, I'll note a couple of things. Positive to budget in terms of expense favorability. The favorability in the labor line is coming down a little bit as we anticipated. That's as a result of putting up additional service and then also the wage adjustment that happened in July. So we expect to see that labor actuals coming very close to budget through the rest of this year. Material, fuel, and power all positive to budget. September was a really good month to run service, very favorable weather throughout the month. Injuries and damages provision is at budget. Security services over the budgeted level. That's as anticipated and in line with our forecast. That's offset by other expenses, which are positive to budget. We have some positive credits against our pension bonds, along with some timing of our contractual services as well. So total for the month, 11.6 million positive to budget on the expenses side. We add that to the total for the year. We see for the year, similar trends continuing across all of those categories. So total for the year, 83.8 million positive on the expenses side. On public funding, variance to budget, we see here sales tax now coming in favorable to budget. If you recall, last month it was unfavorable to budget. So it's good to see that sales tax revenue catching up. Real estate transfer tax remains below budget. That's highly dependent on mortgage rates. We know mortgage rates have not come down yet as anticipated this year. So we're still waiting for that impact, but most likely we'll probably see that in 2025 if rates do come down. Year to date, very close to budget on the public funding side. So sales tax and the matching PTF coming in positive to budget, real estate transfer tax negative to budget, less than a fraction of a percent off budget on the revenue side. So really close to budgeted levels there. We add all of that up and that results in our federal relief funding draw for the month. So total drawn for the month, 26.7 million across our three remaining funding sources. That leaves us 751 million remaining on that federal relief funding. Again, this is in line with our expectations and with the budget that we proposed for next year, along with the financial plan. And then on the commodity side, we did have some movement on the commodities. In 2026, we purchased about 30% more of our fuel. So we locked in fuel. We had some favorable pricing in September as there were some dips in the curve. And so we went ahead and made some advantageous purchases there to lock in more of our diesel purchase for 2026. Next month, I'll talk about the forward purchase of power that we made for 2025 in the month of October. That concludes my report. I'm available for questions.
How aggressive are we on purchasing power?
So what we'll do is fix forward purchases of one or multiple years. So we'll try and lock in 100% of our traction power. Our non-traction power, so the non-rail power, what we use to power buildings like this, we float on that. So we don't lock in that power. But the bulk of our power spend is on the tracks. And we're pretty aggressive in trying to lock in 100% of it and provide that budget certainty that comes with that as well.
Thank you.
We'll take other questions from members of the board. Director Ortiz.
No questions. Thank you.
Chairman Barclay.
No questions.
Director Lee.
I did notice there's a 9 million increase in free rides from 2023. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so overall ridership is up. So it's not a surprise that free rides are up along with overall ridership. So I know we've noted that there's been a 14% increase overall in ridership on the system. This is one of those categories, right? Just like the paid ridership, which has been contributing to that fare box revenue. Something we monitor closely, both sort of authorized and unauthorized free rides. But I think it's all a part of general that ridership growth that we're seeing.
Oh, no, more riders, the better, right? Thank you.
Director Requejo.
No questions.
There are no further questions. Director Jakes. You may now proceed to agenda item number 7.
Okay. Sorry, I just had an old man moment. Okay. Item 7 is the review of an ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of one or more supplemental indentures under which CTA may issue one or more series of corporate purpose debt obligations payable from the sales tax receipt fund and authorizing the issuance of sales tax receipts revenue refunding bond series 224. Court reporters, do you need me to repeat that? Got it? Okay. Tom.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. So today I present for your approval, the ordinance for the issuance of sales tax receipts revenue refunding bonds, series 2024. This strategic financial initiative aims to refund up to $555 million in outstanding 2014 series bonds and to fund the repurchase and cancellation via tender of all or a portion of the Series 2020B taxable bonds, leveraging favorable market conditions to achieve an estimated present value savings of $600 million or 9% of refunded par. These actions underscore our commitment to prudent fiscal management and operational efficiency. The bonds, backed by our robust sales tax revenues, will be issued with terms to adapt to market conditions, ensuring the best financial outcome for CTA. This approach not only maintains our strong credit ratings and rating agency relationships, but also aligns with our long-term financial goals, supporting essential capital projects and operational improvements. I ask for your approval of this ordinance, which reflects our commitment to fiscal responsibility and strategic capital management, positioning us to continue meeting the transit needs of our community effectively. So in short, this is a straight refunding to take advantage of better interest rates that are now available to us vis-a-vis what they were in 2014.
What's the interest rate?
So we're looking at about 4.4%. So in that range, and we won't know until final pricing comes in,
Do you know what's the current interest rate?
about 4.7. So roughly. I'm not going to carry it out to the thousandths of a decimal point, but we can get you that information if you want it.
Thank you, Tom.
Sure.
And what's the timeline of the refinance?
Yeah, so we're looking to do pricing and close on about the second week of December. So we've looked at market flows this year. Obviously, there's been a fair amount of uncertainty this year across the board. We actually think that coming to market in December is somewhat advantageous because a lot of folks wanted to get in prior to November. So it left the market kind of open in the last month and a half of the year. So if we can get in December, we could take advantage of those favorable market conditions and obviously capture savings upfront this year and capture some of those 2024 savings available to us.
I don't recall, since my time on the board, having to prove this. How often does this happen, or does it, do you look at it every year?
So with bonds, we actually couldn't refund these until after 10 years. So 2014, 2024. So now these are available to be refunded. But every time we would issue bonds, we would come to the board for that authorization.
Director Ortiz?
Yes, thank you. When is it worth to go through this process? It's only 0.3 difference.
Net present value of 60 million. So it's a fair amount. These are bonds that are interest only up until 2040. And so we're looking at saving about $2.5 million a year that comes straight out of our capital program funds. And so those obviously $2.5 million now would be available to program into the capital program on an annual basis during the interest only period. And then when we start paying down principal, that value obviously rises beyond then. So even though the percentage may seem small, obviously it's off of a really big base. So it gives us some meaningful savings. Our debt policy allows us to refund once the savings are more than 3%, and these savings are about 9%.
Director Lee?
Thanks, I think this is great that we're always finding, change in the couch cushions. Wondering how much does this offset our fiscal cliff, if at all?
So it's all capital money. So it's not on the operating side. I would say everything helps. So everything helps to provide funding this will be for the capital program, and the initial bonds funded things like our rail cars and the 95th Street station. So we're continuing to pay down the debt on that, but every little bit helps. This will help sort of add to some of the capacity in the capital program.
So keep it.
Director Requejo?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions.
And now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval.
Come on.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Lee, that this ordinance will be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Rekejo.
Yes.
The motion passes. Director Jakes, we may now proceed to agenda item number 8.
Agenda item 8 is the review of an ordinance authorizing a Fourth Amendment to an antenna site license agreement with GREGOCO, GRE-GOCO Orrington Owner LLC for the operation of the authority's communication equipment located at 1603 Orrington Avenue, Evanston, Illinois. Bill Mooney.
Morning, Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Real estate staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing a Fourth Amendment to a license agreement for a rooftop antenna located at 1603 Orrington Avenue in Evanston. CTA has licensed this rooftop location since 1982, and the most recent license agreement was entered into in 2004 and amended in 2009, 2013, and 2020. Orrington has agreed to a Fourth Amendment extending the term through February 1st, 2029. It's an annual license fee of $13,633.08 for rent and electrical usage, which will increase by 3% per year. I'll be happy to take any questions on this item.
I have no questions, Bill.
Director Ortiz,
No question.
Chairman Barclay,
No questions.
Director Lee,
Thanks, Bill.
Director Rekejo.
No questions.
There are no further questions. Director Jakes.
May I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Lee, that this ordinance be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Rekejo.
Yes.
The motion passes. Director Jakes, you may now proceed to agenda item number 9.
Agenda item 9 is the review of an ordinance authorizing a development agreement with JRTC Holdings LLC, a partial release, additional grant, and amendment to an easement with JRTC Holdings and an amendment to an agreement for construction, operation, and maintenance of a fixed facility with JRTC Holdings LLC and the City of Chicago for the renovation, operation, and maintenance of the CTA Clark Lake Station at the former Thompson Center, State of Illinois Center building. Bill.
Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer again. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing a development agreement with JRTC Holdings LLC for the renovations of the CTA Clark and Lake Station at the former Thompson Center. The amendment of the CTA easements associated with the station and the revision to the 1984 Operations and Maintenance Agreement. City of Chicago, State of Illinois, and the CTA entered into an agreement dated September 10th, 1984 for the construction, operation, and maintenance of the CTA's rapid transit station within the former James R. Thompson Center. In 2022, the state sold the building to JRTC Holdings LLC, and pursuant to Transit Board Ordinance number 022-054, CTA entered into an agreement for the renovation, operation, and maintenance of the fixed facility and acknowledgement of the CTA easements and rights to JRTC dated July 28th, 2022, which also envisioned future agreements for the renovation of the facility. The CTA and JRTC have negotiated a development agreement to enter into a renovation project to improve the overall station, including relocating the current street level entrance from Lake Street to Clark Street at the sole cost of JRTC Holdings. This renovation project requires amending the city easement, CTA easement, and the 1984 agreement to reflect the new location and modify other provisions, yet maintain the CTA and the city's rights to own and operate at the station, but altering no other obligations under those agreements. I'll be happy to take any questions on this item.
I'll maybe have questions. I'll yield to my colleagues before I circle back.
Director Ortiz.
No questions. I think it's the new design and the new space should be really good for all of our riders and much better space overall.
I agree.
Chairman Barclay.
Just want to say that I'm pleased. We met with the developers early on in the process. And it's going to be a much better fit. Director Ortiz said, just on the Clark Street side as opposed to the Lake Street side. And any idea in terms of what it's going to actually look like that you could share at this point?
There are some conceptual renderings. So the developer has moved forward with about a 90% design of kind of the space, and they have some conceptual renderings. Some of those were in the briefing package, sir, and I'll make sure that you can see them again. So
They did.
it's a very modern look. It will be in line with the other vision for the renovations of the facility, which is really part of the goal when we entered into this relationship to begin with, was that we did not want to be the old shag carpet on the modern, facility. So
I think this is exciting for the city. They did indicate that it will be a nice tourist attraction, and it's going to look not quite like the Bean, but clearly it would draw tourists there. So we're excited about what we're doing.
truly is an amazing piece of architecture, and the developer's plans really respect the original vision of the architect. And so it's really is a wonderful kind of modernization of a historical piece. So.
Thank you.
Director Lee?
No questions, just excited again. Yeah, 1984 is a long time ago. So excited to have a much more new, modern and accessible station. So thanks, Bill.
Director Requejo?
Just wanted to join my colleagues in the excitement to see this station renovated, and just a few comments / questions. One, this is if not the one station with the most transfers, one of the city stations with the most connections to other lines, is the one that connects with both airports, is one that is going to be used by a lot of people. So one question I had is just high level, Bill, what are some of the improvements that people will see, in this new incarnation of the station, addressing some of the current concerns around, wayfinding, accessibility, etc. And two, what is the estimated timeline? What should our riders and workers at the station expect in terms of start construction or start renovation, end renovation, etc.? Just high level.
Glad to answer those questions, Director. So I think a significant portion of the improvements here are heavily cosmetic. And I think the most notable is the relocation of the entrance. So today, the current entrance for the Thompson Center portion of the station is kind of buried underneath our structure in the middle of Lake Street. And it's oftentimes from a wayfinding standpoint, hard to see. It gets lost in the clutter of kind of that space. The vision of relocating this entrance to Clark and Lake gives the station a very predominant point on the corner. Really makes it a flagship point in that. And so I think customers coming to the station will be able to make that. So it creates connectivity to other bus routes and things like that a little easier in that transfer point. As part of the upgrade, you'll have upgraded wayfinding for directional within the station because it is a multi-level transfer between the subway and the elevated structure, multiple lines. So all that signage gets refreshed kind of in that portion of it, which I think again is a great improvement. And it really becomes a little more isolated from where it was. We were part of the building and now we are still within the building and have a direct connection to that atrium, but you don't have to really enter the building to get to us. It is a station that you're entering into, which I think makes it a little easier for customers going directly to transit while still providing that connection to the facility, all the workers there. So I think there's a lot of benefits that the developer is very anxious to get going. As anyone that's been by the building recently can see the massive amount of investment they're already making on site. So work will start pretty quickly. They're looking to bring forward kind of the final completion of those plans, get them going. And, a significant portion of that work should be done towards the end of 25 with the relocation of that entrance. And then once kind of that entrance gets relocated, then they start to phase into all the other cosmetic renovations around the station. So it really opens up other footprints. While that work is going on, we also have investments we're making in relationship to that are tied to our all stations accessibility commitments, renovating those elevators, bringing them up to a modern standard, as well as the vertical access and the escalator units. We're currently working on one there right now. And then kind of in 26, we do an investment on the platform that's kind of tied to this.
Bill, if I can make one other point that I think is important and goes to Director Requejo's question. One of the reasons why I was so excited about this opportunity wasn't just the fact that we were going to get the money to build the station. An opportunity for us to partner with Google, who, as you know, is one of the premier technology companies in the world. And it creates a space in which we can really work with them to find new and innovative ways to improve the customer experience while supporting the Google brand. I think that what Bill's laying out for you is sort of the baseline of what the improvements are going to be. I suspect as we start to talk to Google, start to talk through other ideas of things that they'd like to, for lack of a better word, test out on CTA, we'll see other improvements, particularly in the area of technology and connectivity, that we'll be able to take advantage of their location as a way to really promote and support that. So I'm excited that there's going to be new and innovative things that we haven't even thought about, that, you know, Google has people thinking about all the time, that are going to make the ability to move around that station easier, but also indirectly, I think the benefits to move around CTA easier that will come out of that. So from my perspective, stay tuned. I think there's going to be a lot more we're going to do. One other point I wanted to make about this particular project, and I think it's important in light of the bigger conversation we're having around the fiscal cliff and the future financial stability of CTA. These are the types of projects and these are the type of opportunities. I think there is a portfolio of other places throughout the city that we can engage in similar activities that create similar revenue streams for CTA going forward, as well as private sector investment in CTA. Given the realities of what has gone on in the public transportation industry in general, given the realities of what it takes to secure our financial stability, one of the issues that I have certainly raised down in Springfield, one of the things that I'd like to see us get more flexibility around is the ability to engage in these types of transactions, be much more aggressive in the real estate market around the property that CTA owns that is adjacent to CTA infrastructure that allows us to leverage those opportunities in ways that can provide better opportunities for CTA. If you look at other transit systems around the world, you will see many of them have totally separate subsidiaries that do nothing but manage their real estate development operations. Creates a revenue stream, a substantial revenue stream for many transit systems that supplements the fare box and other government subsidies that they receive. I think that we have the ability to create a similar model here at CTA, which would allow us to do a whole lot more with the limited resources that we have by leveraging the absolute benefit of access to public transportation in a way that generates more opportunities for development that also supports not only CTA, but the city of Chicago.
President Carter, just to piggyback on what you said, I'm also appreciative of the fact that Google has extended itself financially. I think that's considered, that should be the model that we should build upon it. Calling on other businesses as well to help improve, public transportation areas and stations. We've had preliminary discussions about those things, but this is a good idea and it's a good concept. And I think to build upon this will be in the best interest of the CTA in the future.
Research.
Thank you for the answer, Bill, and thank you, President Carter, for adding more context. Again, very excited about this particular iconic, super central location kind of station. Excited about the partnership with Google, and again, because of the high ridership, and because this is going to be the second experience with CTA for many people that arrive to O'Hare, and this is where they get off to go to their hotel or to go to their meeting. I think it's important to make sure that we engage our advisory, citizen advisory group too, in helping with design, etc., making sure that this really works for the people who use the station too.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions.
And now I believe to place this item on the omnibus for board approval.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Lee, that this ordinance be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ortiz? Yeah. Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Requejo?
Yes.
I'd like to note for the record that Director Nima Jah has joined the meeting. Director Jah? Your vote?
Can I abstain?
You can.
Okay.
Thank you. The Chair, Director Jakes, you may now proceed to agenda item number 10, our purchase and sales award recommendations.
10 is the review of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Chicago, through its Department of Family and Support Services for outreach to individuals in need of shelter. Tom. Tom, you looked about surprised as I did.
I was a little surprised. I hadn't heard that adjustment yet, but we're back on track. Okay, so you will recognize this topic, those of you that were here last year. But I do want to provide a presentation to give a little bit of background on this ordinance. So let me share the screen here. Let's see if I can put this in presentation mode. Okay. There we go. So a little bit of background here on our agreement with the Department of Family and Support Services, and really the topic overall of individuals experiencing homelessness and sheltering on our system. So first of all, I just want to note that this is an industry-wide issue. APTA has identified homelessness and the issue of individuals without sheltering on transit systems as one of their 4 key topics for public transit. So you can see here, there have been a number of studies by research organizations, by the American Public Transportation Association, both researching the topic and providing sort of tools and assessments of initiatives underway at various transit agencies. Chicago is often included in some of these case studies as well. We have talked to a number of our peers about this topic. It is definitely an issue that all transit agencies are struggling with. But I will also say that it's also unique to each different local environment in which they exist. So in Chicago, we conduct, along with cities around the country, once a year, an annual census of the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in the city. That usually happens in January. So it happened in January of 2024. This point in time count counted 18,836 people experiencing homelessness in the city of Chicago. Of those, 1,634 of them were experiencing unsheltered homelessness. Sheltering on the CTA is considered unsheltered homelessness. So 46% of that 1,634 people experiencing unsheltered homelessness were counted on the CTA. So about 46% of the unsheltered homeless population in Chicago is sheltering on the CTA. This is a little bit higher than it was during the 2023 count, but has been relatively consistent in that 40% range. Train and station locations were where the highest number of individuals were counted, but the count encompasses a number of locations across the city, which would include other modes of transportation as well. And then you can see a quote here that from APTA in terms of the impact and sort of what other agencies around the country are doing around this topic. So an overview of what we're currently doing with the Department of Family and Support Services. We currently have an intergovernmental agreement with DFSS for $2 million to fund 2 outreach agencies. Total value of their contracts is $1.6 million. They ride the trains and perform outreach on both the trains and the platforms on the red and the blue lines throughout the year. For Thresholds, which rides the red line, they do it Monday through Friday. Haymarket is 7 days a week on the blue line. Through August, we've spent about $700,000 on these 2 contracts. In addition to engaging with individuals experiencing homelessness, they also provide connections to support services. They provide harm reduction materials. They provide connections to healthcare, and then obviously connections to shelter and or housing when that is available. In addition, the Chicago Department of Public Health funds the night ministry to perform outreach to individuals experiencing homelessness 2 nights a week on our system, 1 night on the red line at Howard, the other night on the blue line at Forest Park, and that is separate and apart from this intergovernmental agreement. Here are more details on the specifics of their schedules. You can see they have both a daytime shift and a nighttime shift where they're looking to engage individuals. And so oftentimes the work of the nighttime shift is to connect them to the daytime shift so that they can access more sort of case management when those services are available during daytime hours. You can see there the days of the week that they work. Also note too that on Thresholds, we are paying for their nighttime shift. Their daytime shift is coming from other sources. And both of these efforts initiated at the start of 2023. So they've been in operation for roughly 1.5 years. So we'll talk about some of the outcomes that we've seen, and we do have KPIs in the contracts. So each of the agencies is reporting on a monthly basis their number of encounters, and then on a quarterly basis, we sit down with them and with DFSS to review some of their outcomes and their performance metrics. So far, to date, or through September, they've had 17,586 contacts with individuals experiencing homelessness. One individual can produce multiple contacts, so and they often do. So there are duplicates in here. One of the main goals is shelter placements. So far, we've had 240 shelter placements resulting from these encounters. What we hear from the agencies and what we've noted in this is that there is a far greater demand for shelter than there is shelter availability. So this underestimates the amount of folks who probably would take shelter were that shelter available to them. Of note here, we do have 5 dedicated beds or spaces for individuals who are sheltering on the CTA. These beds have been available since September of 2023. They have been fully occupied every night since they have been available, again, highlighting the demand for shelter sort of outside of the system from those individuals. The second North Star goal that we have is moving clients into more stable and permanent housing. So far, 104 individuals have been connected to that more stable and permanent housing. These are real success stories where folks are getting into that longer term housing. A lot of this has happened as a result of what are called accelerated moving events, which I'll talk about here in a moment. And you'll see some of the successes of those events, and credit to DFSS and the city for helping to bring those forward and to enable those. And then 284 individuals have been moved into the homeless management information system, which is a critical first step towards getting into long-term housing. The next step after that is having a coordinated entry assessment, which gets them on the list for housing. And 80% of those in the HMIS system have also been enrolled in the coordinated entry assessment. So accelerated moving events. So Chicago's Continuum of Care expanded what are called their rapid rehousing efforts during the pandemic. So what happens is that when an individual experiencing homelessness, they're connected to the rapid rehousing efforts through these accelerated moving events, which is meant to be a one-stop shop. So one day the person is experiencing unsheltered homelessness. They spend that day going through soup to nuts effort to get them into more stable housing and everything that's associated with that, support services, picking out furniture, obviously picking out an apartment, the location, the support that's needed with that, so that they can the next day ideally move into that supportive housing. So doesn't always happen on that term, right? Sometimes there's some paperwork or other things that needs to happen over time, but eventually folks usually do get into that longer term, more stable housing. You can see here we've had 2 accelerated moving events dedicated specifically to individuals who are sheltering on CTA. One of those was in July of 2023, and you can see we had 24 attended and 19 were housed. And then earlier this year in April, all 20 who attended and the AMU was available to, all 20 of them were and remained housed. Here is a breakdown of those encounters by location on both the red and the blue line. So when you look at this information, you'll see there are a couple of key locations where individuals experiencing homelessness are continually encountered, and the teams will spend a lot of time at locations like Clark and Lake or like Howard, reaching out to individuals experiencing homelessness there, but they're not limited to those particular locations. You can see that this list spans the length of the page, and so they are conducting outreach throughout the breadth of the system, and then most importantly, really trying to contact every individual who is experiencing homelessness on the red and the blue lines. Here's the trend in shelter placements. They do check the availability of shelter beds on a daily basis. If there is the ability to move somebody into a shelter bed, they will take that opportunity. That happens by transporting their clients to the main intake center at 10 South Kedzie and then accessing the available shelter placement from there. You can see the trend here in both the blue and the red lines on those shelter placements. In addition to housing, as I mentioned, they do provide additional services to individuals experiencing homelessness. The first one here is food. That's often an entry point to engaging in a productive conversation with one of their clients, and that's the top service rendered for each of these agencies. From there, they go into case management. It's important that people have paperwork, identification, all those things that go along with case management. So some of those support resources can be made available to them. Hygiene items, harm reduction items such as Narcan and others are available to those individuals. And then things like transportation, right? Making sure that their RTA pass is up to date and available to them. And then clothing, right? Refresh of the clothing there. So there really is a breadth of offerings to them in the limited space that they have available to perform the outreach. One of the other things that we track is customer feedback. So we look at how many complaints we're receiving about homeless individuals sheltering on the system and the impacts that they may have on other riders on the system. So what you can see here is a couple of things. One is that right now we're receiving around 30 complaints a month, which is basically one a day, which is relatively small compared to the 1 million people that are riding on a daily basis. So the complaint level overall is relatively low. The second thing you'll note is that when the program was initiated in 2023, the customer complaints have dropped from where they were in 2022. So we have consistently remained below 2022 in terms of those customer complaints as well. You'll also notice some of the seasonality there. As some of the colder months, you'll see more of those complaints come in. We know that the population increases in the winter as people are seeking warmer places to shelter. Then here's a testimonial. I am not going to read the entirety of the testimonial. I will let you read it. You may hear from one of the public speakers at the board meeting today, some further testimonials, but I think it is important to note that I've spoken about a lot of numbers here, but behind these numbers are individual stories. And they are often very compelling stories about individuals in very challenging situations who have been helped by this outreach. Individuals who may have been homeless for a very long time, who without these efforts would not be in stable housing today. So when we talk about 100 people or 105 people moving into more stable housing, this is an example of some of the cases that we're seeing behind those 100 numbers. So what the proposal that we're making to you today is to have a 2-year intergovernmental agreement. The past 2 years, we've had 1-year agreements. We want to fund a 2-year agreement. We want to provide some certainty to the agencies performing this outreach and to the staff that they have hired who have really developed an expertise in this area so that they know that they can continue to have stability in the program that they have with CTA. This was started as a pilot program. We have seen success with this program. And so we think it's worth continuing at the current level. As you can tell, the $2 million per year does provide a little bit of capacity above the $1.6 million in contract value. That allows us to be flexible as additional opportunities may come up that we might want to fund through this agreement. And certainly we're supportive of initiatives to create that additional shelter space, which is really critical towards unlocking some of the solutions to this issue. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Tom, I don't have any questions.
We'll take questions from the other board members. Director Ja,
No questions, thank you.
Director Ortiz,
No questions, thank you.
Chairman Barclay.
So have you looked at to see if there's any correlation between homelessness and criminal activity?
So what we have looked at and what we've done is through our customer surveys, we've asked customers about sort of their perceptions, right? And how do they feel? And when they feel unsafe, why do they feel unsafe? And what they will say is that the presence of unsheltered individuals on the systems makes people feel less safe when they're on the system. That is one of the factors contributing to feelings of safety on the. It's not the only one, right? Sort of general sort of code of conduct violations, right, in general, which this would be categorized as one of those generally contribute to a feeling of less safety on the system. So we have looked at that through our customer research.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's also important to point out that in many cases, the victims of crime on CTA are homeless individuals. They tend to be the type of individuals that criminals tend to prey on. We certainly, I don't know if we have specific statistics that break it down at that level. I certainly can say anecdotally, you see a lot of criminal activity that involve people who are homeless, not from the standpoint of them committing crimes, but for them being the victim.
It is certainly a concern. of theirs. And certainly we note that most of the criminal activity that we see is not attributed to individuals experiencing homelessness.
Director Lee, any questions?
Just a comment. I'm very glad to see this expanding and hope we can continue this work as well as expand also for like bus and other types of like bus shelters, et cetera. So thanks, Tom.
Director Requejo?
Wanted to, first of all, commend CTA for their approach to in working with social service agencies, making sure that homeless populations are treated humanely and provided services in our system. This is not how each and every transit system deals with this issue. And I wanted to start by commending the organization and particularly Tom for being an advocate and yourself speaking in favor of this type of supports. And I also wanted to double down on the comment from President Carter about homeless individuals being victims of crime. I understand sometimes our riders have issues and complain about homeless population taking space in train cars, etc. But I wanted to point out too that norms of conduct in CTA apply to everyone. And so that particular complaint about a homeless individual taking 3 or 4 seats applies also to folks who don't want to remove their backpacks. They want to remove themselves from taking 2 spaces. And so I wanted to make sure that we apply these standards across the board and we just do not focus and target one population that unfortunately has no options sometimes other than being on the train. That said, I think this $2 million is, to me, is the floor and shouldn't be the ceiling. One conversation we had during the briefings is that while these services are helpful, we do not have currently a response for mental health crisis affecting not only these populations, but other populations. I would like to have seen more of that in the response to this. And additionally, to the prior comment from President Carter about how we use our property, our real estate, etc., I think this could be a good opportunity to start thinking bigger, building on the recommendations, again, of the Safety Summit that RTA convened a few months ago, and think about whether it's time for CTA to enter into some partnerships with developers, with social service providers to do some joint development of a space, such as supportive housing, such as shelters, using some of the properties in our portfolio or adjacent to our portfolio as part of an ETOD agenda. So this is to say, this is great to see and to see a renewal of this contract. I think there is much more that could be done. And I hope throughout next year, we come together, we partner with folks to help us think through how to be better at providing services supports to our homeless riders.
If I could respond to Director Requejo, I think he makes a number of valid points that I want to reinforce in the comments that I made earlier. First of all, the 2 million that we have put forth here is obviously subject to revision if there are other initiatives that we think are certainly warranting consideration and funding for. As Tom indicated, right now they're not spending the full 2 million. So we didn't come to the board and say, give us 4 million a year where we don't really know what we use it for. But to that point, DFSS has reached out to us, and I am supposed to meet with the commissioner at some point in time in the future, talk about other ways which we can partner to support what we want to do. To some degree, DFSS is also limited in terms of their ability to put forth resources on what they can do under their broader contract to provide these kind of services. What's happening in these cases that instead of them having to spend their money, we're giving them the money to spend on our behalf. Having said that, as we've discussed in the past, the issues that are impacting CTA, whether it be drug addiction, be it mental health or other things, requires a holistic approach to how you deal with it. You hear the mayor speak to this on many occasions. We are certainly trying to provide our support for those efforts with in one small measure, what we're talking about doing here. And we continue to look for ways to expand and improve upon those efforts as we go forward. With regards to the issue around our real estate opportunities, that's one of the reasons why the flexibility that we need from Springfield is so important. Because right now, as the chairman knows, because he and I have had these conversations on a number of occasions, we are limited in terms of what we can or cannot do. We actually don't have a lot of real estate holdings currently that aren't already being used for CTA infrastructure. But there is a lot of property around CTA infrastructure that if I have the ability to pursue for development opportunities, be it affordable housing, which as Director Quayle knows, is something a lot of transit agencies do. In some cities, they need to do it even for their own employees because their employees can't afford to live in the city where their services are being provided. But in our case, for the opportunity to further support the housing and other needs that we know also are a indirect impact of what we see on CTA, I think those are all positive goals that we want to continue to pursue. Getting the authority to allow us to do more of that, along with obviously other developmental opportunities that can generate revenue, is something that's certainly a part of the agenda that I think we should be pursuing and would support. And would certainly support the advocacy of the board as we continue to pursue those efforts.
Thanks. Thanks for being open to explore additional partnerships, President Carr, Tom, and everyone else. And of course, thanks for continuing doubling down on your commitment to ETOD. As I expressed before, I'm happy to advocate for that in Springfield, whatever we need to do it. And we can talk more about this issue later on during the budget conversation. Thanks.
If I might add too, so I just want to take a moment here just to say that it's been while I've had the privilege of working on this program, I do want to acknowledge that this is really a team effort. So I do want to thank the team, especially from transit operations, right, who's working on this day to day and supporting a lot of the outreach that's out there at the stations and on the trains, our security group, and then obviously the person who really initiated everything, which is Laura DeCastro, who's here in the back, as well, who's really been critical in sort of running this initiative really since for almost a decade. So it really is a team effort. So I really appreciate your acknowledgement of that, and thank you for that.
Was the person you just named?
She's back there.
She's back there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions.
May I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Requejo?
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion to approve the ordinance for the omnibus passes. We may now proceed to agenda item number 11, which is purchase and sales award recommendations.
Correct. Our next order of business today is the review of contract numbers A1 and A2, contract awards for transit operations. I have no questions.
Are there any other questions from board members? Director Ja?
No questions. Thank you.
Director Ortiz?
None.
Chairman Barclay?
No.
Director Lee?
None.
Director Requejo?
No questions.
Director Jakes, we may now proceed to contract numbers B1 through B4.
Our next order of business today is the review of contract numbers B1 through B4, contract awards for infrastructure. No questions.
Director Ja, any questions? Director Ortiz?
None.
Chairman Barclay? Director Lee?
None.
Director Requejo?
No questions.
Director Jakes, we may now proceed to contract F1.
Next order of business is the review of contract number F1, contract award for administration. No question.
Director Ja, any questions?
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
No.
Chairman Barclay? Director Lee?
None. Thank you.
Director Requejo?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no additional questions and there are no further contracts.
Since there are no further questions on the contracts, may I have leave to place the 7 contracts on the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Lee, that the contracts be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja? Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Director Raquel.
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion passes. Director Jakes, we may now proceed to agenda item number 4.
Agenda item 4 is the review of an ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2025 and financial plan for calendar years 2026 and 2027. Tom McComb.
Morning. Give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, great. What I have today is a presentation that will cover actually the 3 items on your agenda that handle the budget. So the first is the operating budget and the second will be with the 2 ordinances for the capital plan. So I'll pause in the presentation as I go through each of those, but the presentation will encompass those 3 items on the agenda. Okay, so an overview of our budget. About a month ago, we put out the president's proposed budget for public review and consumption. Themes for that budget, enhancing service and reliability. This is done by increasing service hours above their 2019 levels, obviously above their current levels, and that's put into the budget. Additionally, we have maintaining the cleaning program for our buses, trains, and facilities that was enhanced in 2024. Safety and security are front and center, right? Budgeted levels reflect some of those additional security expenditures, and then investments in our employees, both in the operating program and in the capital program with things like improvements to bus turnarounds and facilities for employees at those bus turnarounds. So an overview of the budget in a little bit more detail. The total proposed operating budget is $2.16 billion. This is an 8% increase over the 2024 budget. There's 2 things happening there. One is we had a 4% increase in wages. The other is that we're proposing a 4% increase in service. So that brings up the total levels of that operating budget. The capital improvement program is almost $7 billion. That is influenced in a large part by those external funds that we're bringing into the program for the red line extension. We're projecting a ridership growth rate of 25% over budgeted levels. We've already achieved some of that growth already this year. So that would put us at a retention rate in 2025 of 80% compared to our 2019 ridership levels. This requires federal relief funding next year of $578 million. You can see that we do have enough funds to provide that support. A little bit of that funding we're anticipating remaining for 2026 before it is exhausted in the first quarter. Some of the highlights, as I mentioned, the service levels. In addition, there are no fare changes anticipated in this budget. We are anticipating a ridership retention rate at 80%. Those additional investments in our workforce. We're reducing some of the what we've done in terms of the capitalization of our labor and material costs, kind of normal labor and material consumption. Security expense being relatively flat within the budget. We do have an increase in the cost of electricity. And so that is programmed into the budget for a variety of reasons. And then it maintains our investments in these social service outreach programs, the one that we just talked about with the Department of Family and Support Services. So some update on the timeline. So we released the budget on October 11th. The Citizens Advisory Committee met a week later to consider the budget. They reviewed the proposed operating budget, the capital budget, along with our agency performance measures, our public measures. Their comments and questions were across a variety of topics, and I know you'll get an update from them covering topics such as service, workforce security, the commodity expenses, and our vehicle fleet are just some of those highlights. We then went forward with a review with the Cook County Commissioners on October 23rd. That was not only CTA, but the RTA along with the other service boards as well. And then we had our public hearing on November 7th, which I know the board members were there for that. The public hearing on our proposed operating and capital budget. We had 16 speakers commenting on a variety of topics at that meeting. So here's a breakdown of the operating budget. You may recognize some of these slides from the public hearing. On the revenue side, you can see we have three main sources. One is the public funding, which is primarily that sales tax revenue that's coming in. The second is fares and passes. That's we talk about that every month, roughly 370 million coming in through that. And then the remaining gap being filled by that federal relief funding. We are anticipating about a 5% growth in our fare and pass revenue to kind of keep up with the ridership that's growing as well. And then we're anticipating some additional sales tax revenue. The growth rate over the next 3 years hovers around 3%, some a little bit under, some a little bit over, depending on the year. Just a note on ridership here. So far this year, so ridership is forecasted to finish 13.6% higher than in 2023. This is the second fastest growth rate of comparable peer agencies in the country. We're expected to be at about 70% of 2019 ridership at the end of this year. Again, that'll rise to 80% at the end of next year. Note that the ridership retention is stronger on bus than it is on rail, and this reflects that change as well, as does the revenue forecast. This is consistent, again, with trends that we're seeing across the country, and no different than what we see with our peers. On the expense side, labor, 2/3 of our budget, right? So labor is the big expense that we have in our budget. We are anticipating higher service hours in 2025. So they'll be 4.1% higher than they were in this year, and actually 5.8% higher than they were in 2019. So that's that investment in service and reliability that shows up in the budget. On the materials side, we're running additional service. So we're using more materials there. Obviously, our fleet is getting a little bit older as well. And so that contributes to that increased materials expense. Fuel and power, a little bit higher, but it's still about 5% of the total overall budget there, reflecting those increases in the electricity rates that I noted. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about security services and other expenses, but just note security services entails the purchase of the services that we have from both uniformed police officers. So that's the purchase of Chicago Police on their voluntary special employment program. This does not include the mass transit unit. The mass transit unit for the Chicago Police is funded out of the city's police budget. Then this also includes the expense of the private security guards as well within that 85 million there. On the other expenses side, this is our debt service. It's our contractual services, things like Ventra and a lot of our IT programs. It does include our DFSS intergovernmental agreement. That's within those other expenses, along with our pension obligation bond. So updates to the proposed budget. So since we proposed the budget, we have had a lot of discussions, received a lot of input, talked a lot about sort of the security services line and how we might think about programming that, and sort of reflecting on that and acknowledging that the current investments are necessary but not sufficient to provide the expected level of public safety, so that we need to look at the layers that we have within our security program. So we've made updates to the proposed budget to reflect this public input, and specifically the need to reassess our public safety investments. So the difference between the proposed budget that was released on October 11th and the ordinance that you have in front of you today, and also the numbers that were on the prior slide, is that we have reprogrammed $3.3 million within that purchase of security services budget into the other expenses line to allow for funding of new public safety pilots. These experimental initiatives will be informed by forthcoming community input, could take the form of a summit or other way in which we get that community input. This change, again, is reflected in the purchase of security services and the other expenses line item. So you'll see purchase of security services, 3.3 million less than the original proposed budget, and then other expenses making room for this outreach and experimental programs, 3.3 million higher than that level.
Tom, so when you say that it's moved from services, that includes the private security firms that we have been hearing from the public is not working.
It includes that reallocation, right? So if I go back to the prior page, this purchase of security services in the budget book was at 88, right? And now it's at 85, and this other expenses reflects the movement of that funding.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then that leaves us with a gap. As I mentioned at the start of this, we're using $579 million in federal funding to fill the gap for next year. That does leave a remaining amount for 2026. We expect to exhaust that within the first quarter. Total gap we're looking at is $600 million. Again, part of that is going to be filled by that available federal funding. That gap rises to about $642 million in 2027. I know that we're actively talking about the cliff and solutions to the cliff. This is just the size of what it looks like for CTA. The public funding marks, as I noted, sales tax is expected to increase 3.6% in 2026 and then 3.1% in 2027. Then just a note on sort of as we think about additional public funding to support transit, kind of how we compare to our peers here. What you'll see here is what we call the operating loss per rider. This is really the required subsidy per rider, or the subsidy that each region is providing to their transit riders. What you can see here is, first of all, that CTA runs a pretty efficient operation here. We have the lowest operating expense per trip, lowest operating loss per passenger trip. What that results in is it's the lowest subsidy per rider of any of our comparable agencies. So then when we talk about things like funding reform, this is what we look to say, hey, we'd like to be at a level that's comparable to our peers across the country and that investment that other riders are seeing across the country. And that concludes my briefing on the operating budget. I'm happy to pause there for questions or continue with the capital program.
Tom, my question for you. I've been concerned for the past few years about the looming fiscal cliff. I look at the budget, and my question is, are we being so aggressive with making sure that that we're hiring more people, that the services are where they should be pre-pandemic level, which is great, to only have to backpedal in the future? Because we don't know what Springfield is going to do. And as of November 5th, and this is just taking an educated guess, I don't believe Illinois will be one of the incoming president's favorite states, which means that may influence federal dollars. And I know you can't really answer on that end, but do you think we're being so aggressive that we have to backpedal, which means possible layoffs and things of that nature?
I think that what we have heard is really strong support for the system that we have and for maintaining the system that we have. How we're going to be able to define and continue the funding that's necessary to support that system is still to come, right? That's something that we expect to see happening in the spring as that resolution comes forward. But what we have heard is that a lot of support for the system that we have and putting together the funding that's necessary to support that. I think we'll know a lot more in the spring about what the future and those scenarios look like, and that will give us enough time to adjust to what that future looks like.
Let me expand on that, please, a little bit. You're raising really the multi-billion-dollar question, future of CTA. Tom is correct. We know what our customers are asking us to do, which is more service, more reliable service, more frequent service. And we're seeing, as we do that, our ridership continues to grow.
Right.
We have not plateaued in terms of our ridership levels. I think next year will be an interesting year to judge because we will now have reached the service levels that were in existence at a pre-pandemic level. And as you know, there are a number of initiatives that are underway to make sure we're aligning that service with what we know to be the new travel patterns that we believe our customers are interested in and want to see us pursue. So I'm not sure that we figured out yet sort of where the cap is to our ridership. As an industry as a whole, I don't think we figured out where the top is to our ridership. But what we do know is that the economic impact and value of a robust public transportation system matters not only to CTA, but it matters to this entire region, which is why as a regional issue, we're down in Springfield arguing for the funding necessary to keep the system running at the levels that we wanted to. The other thing that we know is that the metrics by which you determine the success of a public transportation system have shifted. Ridership used to be the bellwether metric that determined whether or not your system was successful or not. We're in an environment today where, because of a number of factors, including people's, need to use public transportation to travel, have changed dramatically in a post-pandemic world that has required us to really reshape what the value of public transportation is to our communities. And to have the very real conversation, which we're having down in Springfield, about, do you think it's worth it? If the answer to that is no, and the answer to what you just said will become a reality, which is we will be cutting service, laying people off, and we will be basically shrinking CTA. The answer to that is yes, which, by the way, I believe is the correct answer and one that I think we have a strong case for. Then we will receive the funding that we need to keep the system running at the level that we want it to run at. Some people would argue that we're running 100 miles per hour into a brick wall, that we could have started cutting back. We could have started, basically lowering expectations, and creating a opportunity for a smoother glide path into whatever that future will be in a non-funded scenario. I would argue that, but for the way we've approached this, the city would not be in the position it is economically today. Certainly our customers would not be able to take advantage of the access that I believe is critical to future mobility and opportunity for the city as a whole. And I believe that we can make the case that the obligation of government to adequately fund public transportation is paramount to all the other things that we view as important, be it healthcare, education, or housing. We can't afford to lose this fight. I don't even want to imagine what next year will be like if we do. This is not a sustainable level of service without additional subsidies. I think that's pretty evident. And certainly every indication that we've gotten from Springfield to date is that they're prepared to make the investments to keep our system operating. Question is going to be at what cost, and that ultimately is what will be determined as these conversations go forward. But I think that our goal and objective right now is to continue to show the value of public transportation, to show that the ridership growth indicates that there's still a need and demand for that service, and that the opportunities going forward for economic growth and development for the region as a whole are too important to basically start to watch us fade away. And hopefully at the end of the day, that will win the way for a successful resolution for the funding that we need. I should also point out that this same conversation is occurring all over the country in transit systems, large and small. It's occurring all throughout the state of Illinois. We talk about CTA, Metro, and PACE, but I can tell you that there are smaller transit systems throughout the state that are also facing similar fiscal cliffs, maybe not at the same dollar value that we're facing here in Chicago, but they will have a similar type of impact. And so ultimately, I think that there is a recognition that there needs to be a broader approach to how we subsidize public transportation. CTA would argue that it needs to be equitably based, which is some of the things that Tom was pointing out in terms of our subsidy today compared to our peers, and that we need to be given the tools to allow us to help ourselves, which is some of the things that I mentioned earlier about real estate and creating other revenue streams that allow us to not be solely dependent on government subsidy as the sole basis for covering the gaps between our fare box revenues and the cost of providing service. No matter how you cut it, I think next year is going to be a very interesting year for the city, for CTA, and for our customers and employees, because this is a make it or break it point in this conversation. And certainly everything that I've been involved with for the past 12 months has been really working to make the case for why that decision is a no-brainer and one that we all need to support.
Joe, I know you've been down to Springfield a lot this year, and I've gone a couple of times as well. But I think this board needs a briefing from our government affairs people to let us know the barometer. Are we making progress? Are we making headway? And if not, we need to know that too.
Yeah,
Because if our legislature is not supportive, then it goes back to what you said, maybe we need to dial back a little bit and look at that process a little bit earlier than later.
first of all, yeah,
Well, hold on. It concerns me that we don't have a good sense of really what's going on. And that's probably the way the legislature works sometimes, but the focus for us is, what's going to happen with public transportation here in Chicago after 2025. We're going to run out of money and we won't have this subsidy. And so what are the tea leaves telling us at this point? So maybe a briefing from our legislative government affairs people to come in a little bit more often to tell us, hey, we're making progress or it doesn't look as good as we hope.
well, first of all, I can ask for some of that right now. Because as you pointed out, I've been down in Springfield, I've been meeting with and talking to the leadership about CTA. And I think the short answer question is, we're optimistic that there is going to be a solution. I can't tell you what that solution will be. I can't tell you whether the solution will get us everything that we need, because that is still being discussed. And I don't know that anybody has any tea leaves that'll answer those questions. But there's certainly been openness to the issue. There's certainly been a recognition that there's a problem that needs to be addressed. There's certainly been a discussion about how to go about doing that. And yes, we can give you more detail on what those discussions are, but I don't want to leave you with an impression that we don't have any real feeling about what's happening in terms of where the legislature is on this. I think that it's pretty clear that the legislature recognizes and I believe will do something to address this problem. The question of when they're going to do it, I think, is still an open-ended question. We have timelines that we have been certainly proposing and discussing with them. And there is a reality of when, if they don't act, we will have to start to take action to address the implications of that. But the reality is that I'm not sitting here feeling like we've been talking to a stone wall down in Springfield. I haven't gotten any indication in any of the conversations I've had that there is not an interest in trying to address our problem. And I remind everyone that this isn't just CTA's problem. This is the entire region's problem. And all of our sister agencies along with RTA are down there making the same case for why we need to have some relief from the situation that we're in right now. There also has been some discussion about trying to get some relief at the federal level, but I think as you rightfully pointed out, the chances of that happening in light of the most recent events is probably very slim. So I can't tell you from that perspective, I'm not looking for a lot of hope at the federal level to deal with this problem. So if there is going to be a solution, it's going to come at the local level and from the state in terms of resources that they're willing to dedicate to public transportation to address this problem.
President Carter, there's been several statements on the record from public commenters saying that they want to help, even recently as the public budget hearing, but they want to help. Of course, we welcome their critiques, but they also extended a hand to say we want to help CTA. Has there been any conversation with our government affairs or whomever to talk with the advocacy groups to say, you know what, we do need your help to be vocal on this issue, especially with Springfield. I'm big on collaboration, and sometimes I realize that sometimes shaking hands can be very difficult. But if we're going to move forward between the advocacy groups as well as CTA, there has to be some handshaking and compromising somewhere. So my question, has there been a full court press, if you will, from CTA to the advocacy groups, from the advocacy groups to the elected officials in Springfield?
The short answer to that question is yes. It is not just CTA, Metro, and PACE that are in Springfield making the case for more funding for public transportation. The advocacy groups are down there making a similar case. I think that this has been viewed as an all hands on deck conversation. There have been a number of hearings that have been held by the Senate side of the legislature. There's a working task force that is meeting currently on the House side that is hearing from all of these various stakeholders, including us, about the impact of what a loss in public transportation would mean to this region, as well as the need to find solutions to properly address this problem.
Thank you. And then, Tom, I wanted to go back to you for a moment, about the 3.3 million for security. Thank you for moving those dollars. But in full transparency, after talking with a few of my colleagues, the concern is that's fine that the 3.3 million is there. But in that 3.3 million, who's going to be responsible for developing task force, for developing, I brought up the idea of why don't we have violence interrupters on our trains? Because safety and security, reliability of service has been what I've been hearing as the top two concerns. Infrastructure and capital improvements does fall in there, but not as much as safety and security and reliability of service. I think we're moving very well as it relates to the timeliness of bus and rail, bus more so than rail, but we're getting there. But the safety and security piece is what concerns me. So again, I'm glad to see that you all moved it. But how aggressive will we be if we pass this budget on making sure that that money is going out to groups, or that we are bringing in others to have conversation with us about what really is needed on bus and rail to provide the safety and security for our passengers? And with that the board is being heard, because the other piece of that is things are being asked for. We need deliverables, but feeling as if we're being, that is being thrown under the table. We hear you, but there's no response. So can you respond to that? How aggressive will we be? Because this is very, very important to the public.
I'm not going to let Tom answer that.
Okay.
That's a question to come to me.
All right. So then, Tom, the president's going to answer.
So
Sounds good.
I'm getting
Sure.
to respond to the board's request, which I will do aggressively, and lay out a plan, a strategy on what we do it. Obviously, as I sit here today, I don't have an answer to that question. Just made decisions over the last 24 to 48 hours. But I heard what the board wants. I will sit down with my team, and one reason why I don't want Tom to answer is Tom himself is not the person who's going to figure all that out. It's going to be a group effort. It's going to involve a number of people at CTA that I need to sit down with and put together a implementation plan on what we will do with the money, the timeline which we will do it, and the strategies that we will deploy. I commit to you that we will put that together, present that to the board, and get input from the board about that approach before we execute on it. I don't know the answer to your questions as we sit here today. I think it involves a broader conversation of a number of issues that impact the challenges that we're dealing with here and the stakeholders that are involved. But I'm prepared to do that and to give the board an answer to the question that you're asking us for.
Will that also include having conversations with the Citizens Advisory Board?
It'll include everybody who is a stakeholder in this discussion. I think that's what we heard from the board they're looking for. And that doesn't just include within CTA, but also with our stakeholders in the community who are impacted by these issues. The question of what you do to solve crime on CTA is as complex a question as anything you would discuss around solving crime in the city of Chicago. And as all of you know who deal with these issues in a much broader sense than just public transportation, there are no simple solutions to them. What we should do, where we fit into that bigger conversation, how we address those issues, will require a multiple, layer of conversations with numerous stakeholders and people of interest, including our customers and especially our employees, to figure out what the best solutions are to address this without any real guarantee on how effective they will be. I want to be clear with the board about that up front. If I knew, as we said today, that if I did this one thing, this problem would go away and all of our customers, employees would feel safe and there'd be no issue with CTA, I would have done it years ago. Having said that, we're going to continue to work this problem. It's what we've done with all the other issues that we had to deal with the CTA. It's one of the reasons why our service is back up to the levels that it's at today. We work the problem, and we'll work this problem until we get to a resolution that we feel satisfactory with.
Has the security team taken a look at what's working, what's not working, and said, let's strike what's not working?
I want the security team taking a look at it. The security team is also taking a look at what everyone else is doing throughout the entire country. And this book that I'm holding right here is a list of activities, issues, parables, all the things that we've looked at to try to figure out what the solution it should be. What I will tell you is that no one has figured out a solution to this problem. It isn't just unique to CTA. It's a problem that everyone is facing, and it's a problem that is impacting a lot of cities outside of Chicago. But having said that, we are open to new strategies, we're open to new approaches. The money that is allocated for security is scalable. You should not assume that just because I have $83 million that I must spend $83 million on security. I can increase or decrease that at any point in time. There's nothing magical about that. That money is available for us to do what we think will most effectively address the issues that we are concerned about. And if we determine that there are other issues that we need funding for, we can certainly take money from the security contracts, reduce the number of security guards, and use that fund for other things. That's part of what we'll have to figure out over the course of the upcoming months that will ultimately deliver to the board an updated strategy on how to approach this.
Dora, probably one of the 800-pound elephant in the room is we're beholden to CPD. We simply do not have enough police officers on the train. I hear that complaint all the time when I ride the trains. It's rare that I see police officers. Raised this last month. We want what was given for the Democratic National Convention.
Mm-hmm.
We want the city to basically police public transportation with that same degree of fervor and interest. We saw them ride the trains. We saw them on the platforms. Our customers saw that. But when the convention was over, the show was over.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need more police. And so if that's calling the superintendent as many times as we need to call him to get more police officers, we need to engage CPD to make sure that we have maximum number of police. We understand their problem. We met with them earlier in the year and they're down a couple thousand officers. So we understand it. But this transit board is responsible for basically maintaining safety and security for our citizens. And our citizens don't feel that way right now. The other thing that I want to address also is that the budget security represents a small fraction of the budget. And so, I want to commend you guys. You hired 1,005 bus operators, which was almost unimaginable because, we talked about, can that actually be done? And you did it. The numbers for ridership increased to 70%, projected to be 80%. These are things that are really moving in the right direction. We're lagging a little bit with security and customers feeling safe. And so we want that to be the priority of the day going into this new budget.
I think we understand that. I also agree with your comment about the police. We don't have enough police officers on CTA. It's just plain and simple. Look at the size of our system. Look at the coverage, geographic coverage of our system. look at what our customers tell us that they want to see, which is more police presence. That's different than arrest and engagement in a negative way. It's the physical presence of uniformed police officers that make people feel safe. And that continues to be a problem. You are right. Both you and I have made requests of the Chicago Police Department to make us a priority. And, as you rightfully point out, they're dealing with that within the context of bigger challenges that they're facing with the city as a whole. But to be quite honest with you, we need for it to be a priority. We need for resources to be devoted to CTA, and we need for our customers and our employees. I know we always talk about the customers, but our employees who are also victims of crime that occur on CTA, in some cases just as much as our customers, want to see police officers. They want to know that they will be safe when they're basically carrying out their day-to-day responsibilities. I hear it all the time from the unions. I hear it all the time from our customers. You hear it all the time from both our customers and the unions. I also hear it from elected officials. And when I go and appear at all these hearings I've been going at for the past year, that's been numerous, there isn't a hearing that I go to where I'm not asked a question about safety and security of CT. And without the right resources to support what needs to get done, we're not going to solve that problem. I'm prepared to move whatever resources I have in any direction that we think would be the most effective way to address that problem. But I also know that there's a resource that I don't have, that I know is a part of this problem, and that's police. And we need for that resource to come to the table and step up, just like everything else that we're doing.
How much is including in that, President Carter? We have the 3 million move. Same way we moved the 2 million to the omnibus for board approval for
PFSS.
or the
PFSS.
right. Yeah. Is there room in there? And I heard you say earlier, so I'm glad you said it, that you can adjust where necessary. Because yes, there are uniformed police officers we need. But we also need, and we've said this before, we also need persons on there who are less threatening. Because uniformed police officers make some feel comfortable, but not everyone. So is that in the conversation as well?
It is in the conversation, but I think it's in the conversation a little bit more complex way than you may be thinking about it. I want to remind everybody that I have a dedicated group of, almost 800 budgeted positions for employees to do what you're talking about. They're called CSAs. And I'm more for a minute, I'm going to focus on the rail side because there's a whole different conversation about bus, what you do in that environment. I think there are opportunities for us to do more with them that can make them much more effective in the issue that we're talking about. But I also recognize that there's a labor component to all these conversations that I have to work through. One of the reasons why I'm not sitting here today and telling you, in 1 month, I want to be able to do A, B, C, and D, E, F, is that I have to be cognizant of the environment that I'm operating in with our unions. I have to be respectful of their rights and ultimately what decisions we make, particularly around either our workforce or contractual services we want to put in place that don't infringe upon the rights of labor and their expectations. So part of the complexity of this conversation is figuring out where those opportunities lie and how they lie. But I can tell you in my little secret notebook here, ideas, one of them is focused exactly on that point, and at the appropriate time, we are prepared to brief the board on all of those options and the ways in which we can engage to address those concerns. I don't believe that you solve all these problems with police officers. I also know that there's some problems that you cannot solve unless you have police officers. And somewhere in between those two extremes is what we're talking about. But you want to do it in a way that's both effective and efficient, particularly given the financial challenges that we're dealing with. And so I think we have to figure out what that strategy looks like and what of the various options we have available will get us to the right place. And then what does that mean in terms of adjustments, in terms of what we have currently in place to reflect that?
So we will, moving forward, we will hear from you
Yes,
as opposed to hearing from, security.
you'll be hearing from me about what the strategy is going to be moving forward. Now, that may involve members of my team, including security, because they'll be a part of that conversation. But the point is that I'm accountable to the board for what they establish as their priorities. You have established what you want as a priority for us to address in the upcoming year. I have recognized even before you said that it was a priority that we have to deal with. I spent a good portion of this year focused on the priority of getting our services back up to the levels that they need to get to, which I'm very happy to say we've achieved. I recognize that in that process, we've continued to struggle with safety and security. I hear it, as we've discussed, on a regular basis. We recognize that there's something we have to do differently. What that something is what I'm obligated to bring back to this board and inform you for a path going forward.
Thank you.
We'll take other questions from members of the board. Director Ja?
I don't want to pile on. I think you covered a lot of what we provided. So thank you for doing that so succinctly. The only one thing I want to add is I think it's time for us to be more vulnerable and transparent in terms of if there's a level of service we expect CPD to provide us, and if that's not been provided, I don't think that's a problem that we should be solving, but that needs to be out in the public and discussed openly rather than like behind the closed doors. If we're expected to see 200 and we're not getting that, I think that needs to be on the board agenda every single month until it's fixed. And I don't think we've talked about it. I don't actually know what the numbers are on that. And so I think what I would caution CTA is as much as we want to partner and collaborate, we need to be focused on why do we exist? And there are bigger problems that it's not in our purview to solve. We shouldn't be trying to solve them and taking the resources away from what we are here to do. And I feel like a lot of times when we talk about these things, we kind of mingle these. We need to be direct and clear on here are our priorities. This is what we control. This is what we can't control. And we can't go solving things that we can't control. So let's just be mindful of the resources we have because they're limited, as we can see. And I think we just need to be clear and transparent on what we can do and what we can't do.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. I have certainly made the comment that we need more police on CTA, and I've not only made it here at the board, I've made it in other hearings that I participated in. But I haven't seen, to your point, the level of accountability to call to question what CPD is doing to address our concerns. And I can tell you that I've said this to the media. I've said this to other elected officials. I said, why aren't you raising those questions? Because as you know, we don't control the police department. We don't control their budget. We don't control their resources. We can only ask, like I would point out, every other community, business, and citizen asked of their police department, what are you doing to protect us? The difference has been the focus, in our case, has been on what are we doing to protect everyone, as if the police didn't even exist in this conversation. And to your point, they do exist. They're a significant part of the strategy that we need to address this problem. And I can tell you, whatever the number is not enough. I can tell you, whatever that number is, if you look at other transit agencies of any comparable size to CTAs, it is significantly lower. And while I recognize that there's a problem that the police department has on a much bigger scale with regards to recruiting and hiring and retaining officers, it doesn't mean we should be left with no support for what it is that we need to have to make our customers and our employees feel safe. We are a part of this community just like everybody else is, but yet we don't seem to get treated the same way. And yes, I don't mind being transparent about it. I certainly hope and pray that the police department would come to this board and tell you what they're doing and how they're doing it and what their commitments are, just like you're asking these same questions of me. Because it's only the only way we're going to fix this problem is if all of us work together to get to solutions to make it better. And yes, the police are a part of that kind of.
Yeah, and I think just to clarify, we cannot assume to operate pretending the police doesn't exist. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, though, the gap is there are things we can do that is in our purview, like using technology, looking at the dollars we're spending in and actually questioning quarter by quarter, month by month, week by week to say, is this the right investment? Is this giving us the result we expected to, the level that we wanted to? I think those are things in our control. What I'm saying is that accountability needs to lie where you're expected accountability to be. And we cannot take CPT's job and make it CTA's job. And I think that's unrealistic. That's not what we expect of you and your leadership, but we do expect wherever you're spending the dollars that we're being mindful of, is this the best way to use technology or resources or people, human beings to solve this problem and continue to put money in it when we have no path that shows improvement. And I think those are some of the questions that we've asked. And I'd love to, when you're ready, to see what your plans are around that. But I do think that we need to pause and reflect that it's not a problem that CTA can solve on its own. And I don't think it's the accountability on public safety lies on us pretending that CPT does not exist in the city.
Well, if they wanted to lie with us, then we should create our own police department. That's my belief. And I can tell you why that would not be any sort of a short-term fix to our problem. But part of the problem is we don't own all the resources to basically address this problem. That we continue to try to find ways to solve it. So I am perfectly comfortable with that approach.
I think this board wants to look at all of those options. You know, if we can't keep people safe on the red line, and we know at the time a lot of these crimes took place when our customers are most vulnerable, then we need to look at all options. Because I think people get serious, at least our elected officials get serious. You say to our city council members that we might have to curtail our hours because we don't have enough police protection. Then all of a sudden, you'll hear from them. So this board is directing you to put all the options on the table. We'll vote what we want to eat the meat and spit out the bones. But the bottom line is we want to know all the options that are available to us. We can make an informed decision as to what we think is best to safeguard the public's interest.
And just to be clear, but I think I heard you correctly, but I want to be sure that for the record, we're establishing this. All the options include service actions.
Yes.
Understood. And I can tell you that my staff is already working on that option along with all the rest.
Director Ortiz?
Yes, thank you. I know a lot of people have been working really hard in the last couple of days. So I want to thank everyone for their work, their commitment, and for caring so much about this issue that we've been hearing consistently from all of our speakers, from all of our writers, from all of us. And just, I want to say thank you first and foremost. I think the allocation of 5% is a great start. And I also believe that there is a lot more for all of us to continue to improve within safety and security. I'm particularly interested in a couple of fundamental pieces. So when we talk about the only solution or the best solution is police in our system, I humbly disagree that that should be our first and only and unquestionable solution to this problem. And so having an allocation that is really looking at alternative initiatives, I think, again, it's a great start. But I've heard consistently that armed police officers in our system is the only and the most effective way to go. And I continue to humbly say, I don't believe in that. I think there are many other options that we should look at, particularly with police officers and people of color and how many tensions there have been. I think there's been a lot more that's been done, and we should put that to practice. Another fundamental piece that I'd like to share is that I appreciate the ownership. I think in a lot of meetings, a lot of our board meetings, I know you take it personal, and I appreciate that. I think all of us take it personal. And so it's all of our responsibility to put in our effort to think about these solutions. And as much as I think we all have great qualities, which is really important, and we need to bring those to the table, I also think that there are a lot of people outside of this room, outside of this agency that can bring a lot to us. That's knowledge, expertise, and other ways of thinking. And so to think that within the CTA, we can come up with the best solutions, I think it's great. I think it shows a lot of care, but I don't think that it's enough. I think we are better together, and understanding all of the other people that are around us that can help us really address and think about these in a very comprehensive way is an opportunity that we have at hand that we should really use. The other piece, I think you've heard, and again, I don't want to sort of repeat, there are a lot of great ways to address the solution. There might be technology, there might be, individuals with arms, there might be none, there might be other people. And so I just really think we need to be open-minded on that and allocate funding appropriately to what is working. But to do that, we need a really strong strategic plan that is going to guide us in terms of like, where are we going? How do we want to get there? And then all of these other pieces will fall in place. So again, just really wanting to emphasize a gratitude for all the team members that have been working. This is a great start. There's a lot more to go. And so I really want to, again, welcome and stress that there are a lot of people who can help address both safety and security, but overall, a strategic plan that's going to help us get there that doesn't just include the CTA.
Well, as I indicated, when the chairman asked me that question, we're committed to going out to the community, to all of our stakeholders and getting their input on an approach to do this. I'm committed to doing a holistic assessment of the entire situation and bringing the best practices that we can garner from both our community, from our industry, from security experts, from anybody who can ultimately provide value to this conversation. It is not an internal discussion that we're talking about having. It is a discussion that's going to make sure that we understand what the options are, and it's going to be a discussion going to be clear about what is it that our customers and our employees want. We all have our own anecdotal beliefs about what we think is most effective or what we have concerns about, what we don't have concerns about. The people that I really care about are our customers and our employees, and understanding what they view as effective ways to address their concerns, as well as the things that we can identify that can support that. I think you will not be successful in addressing the perception of safety and security on CTA unless you are prepared to hear from the people who ultimately are creating that perception. And to some degree, that requires us to not let the media control the narrative of what CTA is or is not in that regard, but let our customers control that narrative. And part of what I've asked my team to do is to get that specific kind of feedback from those individuals so that we understand what they're looking for. Not just to your point, not just what we think is best, but what they would like to see and how that aligns with the tools and the resources that we can bring to bear to show and effectively communicate that back to them.
I appreciate that. A fundamental piece that I am asking for is that in that scenario where you're listening to people, who makes the decisions?
The board makes the decisions. It's a simple question, but you have made it very clear that you want to be engaged in and you want to weigh in on what the strategy is going to be. So from my perspective, I will make recommendations to the board and the board will decide.
I appreciate that. Again, where I'm trying to get at is that these other people should have an actual decision-making process that brings other people to the table so that we collectively can provide ideas. As much as I am committed to this board and as much as all of us have talents, I am not an expert in safety and security. So to put it on any one of us who may or may not be experts, I don't think it's fair. I feel like there should really be a broader group who actually have a say-so and not just expressing what they want to see or what their expertise are, and really have a more broader understanding of how do we collectively go there and not just be able to say that, but actually vote on that. And then we then can say, look, these are the decisions that this group has been working on and is then providing to all of us to decide on, and the public as well.
I don't disagree with the input that should come from individuals or people or groups that may have opinions, desires, or wishes about what we should do or should not do. But at the end of the day, the allocation of funds, money, it's a board decision. And you're not going to be able to just ask someone else to make that decision for you. We're going to have to make it. Yes, certainly we can have input from and get feedback from, and certainly get recommendations from any number of groups, individuals, stakeholders, experts about what they think we should do. But all of that comes to a point where someone has to make a decision about, do you do it or not do it? And that you can't just give to anybody to decide, because they don't control the resources to do that. We do. And so we will have to make a decision at some point. But it should be an informed decision, as the chairman indicated, around what these things are that make sense and whether or not we think they will be effective, and how will we know that they will be effective, so that we're comfortable that we understand what we're getting for the resources that we're spending.
And I can I'm gonna add, if you don't mind. I think what we're asking for is give us enough information where we feel good about making decisions, where we work backwards from what is your success criteria. How are you going to define your key metrics to say, if we employ this, we are anticipating X number of these incidents to go down by 5%, 10%. And I'm not saying it has to be like that specific, but it has to work backwards from, because I think, hope is not a strategy, and we need to kind of understand like the entire roadmap to say, if I do X, Y, Z, I anticipate a hypothesis. And let's look at that. And I think this team is very good at running POCs and pilots where we've seen these metrics. But I think where we feel is that we are not able to scale it to a level where we can then keep ourselves grounded to what was it that we started with. This was our end goal. And with this strategy, I expect us to see these results. And I think we need to be very results driven when we're asking for funding or decision making. And as long as that process is clear and clarified, I think all of us will be very comfortable saying, I understand. Because 6 months down, when I come back and say, tell me where you're at, you should be able to tell me I started day one here. Here's where I am. I am behind. It didn't work, or we made some wrong choices, and here's how we're going to pivot. I think we need like that level of clarity and communication where we're comfortable making the decision. I think that's kind of where you're going with it.
That's exactly it. I'm comfortable making decisions when we have informed, thorough information. So I'm going to second that clearly, and thank you.
But I would suggest, because this was the way you approached this conversation from the beginning, is that you let the experts tell you what your expectations should be. I don't know that you'll get the clarity that you want on this type of an issue in terms of the end result. Whatever it is that the expectation should be, it should be clear from the very beginning.
Yes.
It isn't, to your point, no one sitting in this room is an expert on security, including me. There are people who are much more knowledgeable and have a lot greater expertise in this, who can inform us as to the appropriateness of certain strategies and as to the hopeful outcomes. Because I think there are so many variables in that conversation that are outside of our control. If the police could figure out with definitive certainty that they could eliminate certain elements of crime by just implementing one strategy or two strategies or even three strategies, they would do it. So I think there's always going to be a certain amount of unknown in this conversation. That doesn't mean you can't measure effectiveness. It doesn't mean you can't say that you're moving things in the right direction and there are ways you can see that. But I think we need to manage our own expectations about what the end results may be from what we do We should, that expectation should be based on information that people tell us. It's the way you should look at these strategies and these approaches and what you should look to see whether or not they're being effective one way or the other.
There's this human element here. I mean, fortunately, sadly, we lost 4 people, 4 of our passengers a couple months ago. Nobody anticipated that. No one saw that coming. But it happened. We can't control who's going to get on our system with a weapon. We can't fully control that. You can't control who's going to have a bad day at work and take it out on the next passenger. Some of this is situational. And, you know, whatever you build, you know, bear in mind, you have to have those elements included because, you know, we, like you said, the police can't predict where all the crime is going to happen. If they did, then, you know, we all feel safe.
Yeah, I'm reminded of that movie where Tom Cruise, where they actually could have technology that would tell you what a crime is going to happen before it happens, but you could just stop it in advance. Well, unfortunately, we're not there.
I don't know if we'll ever be
I
there.
don't know if we'll ever be there either. And I'm not sure that I want to be there, but that's a totally different story. But the point is, when we talk about safety, it's a very similar conversation. I can't predict in advance everything that someone may do that will result in an accident or an injury on CTA. But what you talk about is mitigation, risk mitigation. The similar type of approach with security, which is what you want to do is implement strategies that mitigate as much as you can the variables that you don't have control over, so that you can at least diminish
Exactly,
potential impact.
exactly.
Which is very different than saying, I can guarantee no one's
And
gonna get.
I don't think the board is asking for any kind of guarantee, right?
No,
I don't think, so here's,
I agree.
we agree, there is no world in where somebody can walk in and say, this is not gonna happen. I can't say that about my own child, so forget about other people, right? What we are asking for though is there are preventive measures that we can take and there are precautionary measures we can take. When we do take those, what we're asking for is we need to have a better way of measuring. Has this been effective? Has this been not effective? And here's why. And I think that's a very, very fair ask, which today I don't feel like we have. And we need to be able to look at the actions and our efforts in a way where we can say, this didn't work, so we're going to pivot and it's okay. It's okay to say this didn't work and now we're going to do something different to try something, a different approach. And it could be as simple as I saw someone on the train I didn't like. Do I have the ability to instantly report this? And is there an ability for that report to go somewhere where I see within, let's say, your SLA is 21 hours, 60 minutes, within 60 minutes, that problem is solved. And I'm just throwing this, I'm not saying that's what the standard is. Set some SLAs and standard where there is a mechanism where you're simplifying, you're giving the power to the passengers. We see numbers where we looked at earlier about homelessness, where we only see 31 incident a day. I will tell you, every time I'm on a train or a bus, I encounter that at least 4 or 5 times if I've been on the same day, just one person. I'm not reporting it, right? So I think we need to, like, data only says one part of the story. I think we need to be more mindful about how are we defining our SLAs and is there a better way of measuring our efforts? That's what we're asking about, not necessarily prevent all the crimes, because you can't. And when things happen, I think we also need to proactively report back. Today, 5 years ago, this happened in CTA. Today, we are here. I think, a lot of like this proactive outreach is probably going to change the perception, but there is no way like you can put all of the money and all of the resources, and there will be instances where you cannot control them. And I don't think that's what we're asking for. I think we're asking for putting measurements and KPIs, SLAs in place that you can go back and say, I spent $10 million in 3 months and I expected this amount of incidents to be reported and we resolved 80% of it. Very clear, no questions asked. And if there are questions, you have the data to go back and say, this is how we solved this problem. I think that's what we're asking for, not necessarily like guarantee me that there's not gonna be any incidents, right? Or put all your effort in this. It's like, can we have a more thought out process where we can map out the customer journey and say, these are the places where we're inserting security. And here's how we're gonna measure it, how successful we've been. That's it.
And I still want to reiterate to what you said earlier, that this information is being brought to us on a regular basis. And something is being tried, to Director Ortiz's point here. And you said it earlier, you can make things happen. You've heard what we said, make it happen. If it doesn't work, we've tried it. It's being reported back to us. We tried it, it didn't work. Okay, we're gonna try something else. But when we don't know, we can't make a decision without really knowing what has worked and what has not worked. So I'm again appreciative of the 3.3, I believe, being moved from there, and I look forward to seeing what happens from this conversation moving forward, Mr. President. Thank you. I think the only person was Director Recajo. He didn't.
Director Recajo.
Yeah, he didn't have a chance to speak.
So the Director Recajo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
And listening
Do you have
carefully.
questions? Do you have questions, Director Recajo?
Hello?
Yes. Questions?
Okay. Yes. And I want to bring it back to the original question because I feel that we have covered a lot of territory here, related and unrelated to the budget. And I'll say, well, first of all, this was my first budget, CTA budget experience. And I feel that the process itself of developing the budget can be an opportunity for us to learn from and to do it maybe differently next year, especially knowing that next year is going to be a very, very critical year. I share the concerns that Reverend Jakes started with around the fiscal cliff coming up. And I know that we cannot control what Springfield is going to do, but we can control how we show up. We have full control as to how CTA shows up. And we can show up as a agency that is a collaborator, that is an open agency, that is looking for partnerships, that is looking for dialogue, that is honest and transparent about what works and what doesn't, that proposes a different future for transportation, or we can show up as an agency that is insular, that is top-down, that is opaque, that doesn't quite respond to the needs of the public, etc. And I want to believe that we are going to show up as the first type. That said, again, the experience of creation of this budget gave me some hints as to why maybe some of the underlying reasons why we are not quite there yet in terms of collaboration and partnership, as Director Ortiz mentioned, which is also my desire too, which is the question to CTA is leadership is, how can we be more proactive, or what would it look like for CTA to be an example of collaboration and partnership, to be an example and a model of an agency that is going through a difficult moment right now, and rather than retreat and entrench, is opening doors and saying, hey, we need everybody's help here. And we want to set up the table, and we want to arrive to decisions collaboratively, and in ways that are different, again, from what I experienced with the budget process, which is, first of all, the board, or at least myself, we were not engaged until what I think was pretty late in the game. And we had to respond to that. And same thing with, public comment and other folks who had to be more reactive to decisions that engage in the creation of such budget lines and ideas. So to me, again, the the future of CTA and the future of our asks to Springfield and the future of our security is tightly connected to how we show up, right? And how we show up is tightly directed as to the type of agency we want to be. I know, and I said this many times, I feel that we sometimes don't put too much emphasis on technology and hard infrastructure, and we do not have the proper human infrastructure sometimes to be a collaborator and a good partner and set those tables. One example I keep showing at every meeting almost is the fact that the safety summit, which was a great opportunity to bring together RTA, the transit partners of RTA, the advocates, the police, social service agencies, pretty much everyone that has something to say, something to contribute to helping with security. That summit took place, and then recommendations came out, and then there's been no movement in terms of reconvening, reassessing, until we recently pushed, and when I say we, I say a number of advocates that have been pushing for this allocation of $3.3 million in a different way of approaching security. This should be the natural way of things. It shouldn't have to take a lot of effort and energy. I think we need to be proactive in that partnership and collaborative approach. We need to be one of the key conveners and the one setting the agenda collaboratively rather than just showing up to conversations. And again, I think the future of our funding and our funding formulas for CTA is tightly connected to how we're going to show up in this next year and moving forward. And again, I want to mention that this budget creation and this was a great opportunity for some of us to learn, okay, this is how things have worked in the past. This is not what's going to work in the future. This is not the type of new day that CTA is going to need in order to recover from this. And I don't like to look at this as a deficit issue and the fiscal cliff. I think, yes, there is value in showing to people the cuts, that may come if they don't contribute or we don't have a proper funding. But I feel also that you can get people even more engaged if instead of doomsday scenarios, or if in addition to that, you show them, and this is what the future of transportation could look like. This is the type of expansions that we could do. This type of safety you would get. This is the type of cleanliness that you would get if only we had, this different scenario. So again, I guess my reaction to the budget process was one, it's still learning and trying to understand how this has done in the past. As someone that has worked in collaborative and coalition spaces for 20 plus years, it kind of didn't work for me. I wanted to be engaged a lot earlier in the process, and I wanted the budget and the strategic planning that is taking place to be, as Director Ortiz mentioned, more of an ongoing collaboration. So we don't have these, long, extended, protracted conversations once a month in these board meetings, and then this keeps, repeating as a pattern. Instead, we have channels and tables organized where we have an ongoing way to know how things are doing, and collaboration, partnership, openness, again, becomes one of our key values as an agency, as well as our reputation out there. And again, I think if we cultivate that line of operations and that way of operating, we're going to be successful with Springfield and other funders. If we do not, I think we're going to fail. So that's my reaction to this agenda item.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions.
There are no further questions. May I now have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja.
We want to hold
Yes, can we?
until all three presentations have been made.
Before I move to put it on the omnibus?
Director Lee,
Actually, respectfully, Director Ortiz, would you mind if we tabled your motion? A second, just because we need to address a procedural matter regarding one of our committee members, our board members. So Director Lee has left the room to join the meeting online because of a work obligation. And I would request that we have a motion to permit Director Lee to join the meeting remotely.
Second.
It's been moved that Director Lee may join the meeting remotely. It's by Director Ortiz. It's been seconded by Director Ja. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Requejo?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to allow Director Lee to join the meeting remotely passes. We can go back to the previous motion,
Now,
There was a,
which was properly moved and seconded by Director Ortiz and by Director Ja, which was to place the ordinance on the omnibus.
there's a request to do other presentations.
Right.
Ahead of the vote.
Capital.
so then that motion needs to be rescinded.
Right. You would have to orally rescind your motion.
I rescind my previous motion. I move that we do the other presentations prior to voting.
So we'll take up all the budget items with one vote.
Yes.
And Director Ja, you seconded the motion. Do you also rescind?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve this ordinance for the omnibus has been rescinded by Director Ortiz, and Director Ja has rescinded her second. And Director Jakes, you may now proceed to agenda item number 5.
Agenda item 5 is the review of an ordinance amending ordinance 023-131, approving the fiscal years 2024 through 2028 capital improvement program. Bill Mooney.
I'll actually present on that one.
Tom McGowan.
Thank you. Okay, what I'm going to present to you is an overview of the capital program, which encompasses the two ordinances before you. One is the amendment of the current year, and the other is the approval of the subsequent 5-year program. So these slides that I am going to be sharing are the same ones that we used at the public hearing. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I do want to hit the highlights of the capital program, in particular, the increase to 6.95 billion, which is driven by the inclusion of the discretionary program grant from the federal government that is associated with the Red Line Extension program, along with the transit TIF funding of close to $1 billion, which is also being put in place to support the RLE program. All of the other major projects exist in the current 5-year program and will continue to exist in the subsequent 5-year program with additional funding allocated to them. Some of them are described on the subsequent pages. Again, this is content that we covered at the public hearing, including the All Stations Accessibility Program, Bus Electrification Program, our Modernization Program, which is replacing both our bus and our rail fleet, along with upgrading them. And then within this program is also some of the employee facilities that I mentioned as well. So in addition, that's the upcoming 5-year program. In addition, the amendment to this year's program does add those two funding sources for the Red Line Extension. It provides additional public transit capital fund allocations for some specific earmarked investments that you can see the 4 of them there. It incorporates additional funding from the Department of Homeland Security in the amount of $19.3 million. And then it also programs additional funding for the Forest Park branch and planning along that branch. That concludes my presentation on the 2 capital program amendments. Just a note in terms of the budget calendar, we are making a presentation to the RTA next week about our budget and the capital program. And then the RTA board will vote on the regional budget at their December meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions? Not, I'll move on to the next item.
Are there any questions, Director Ja?
No questions, thanks.
Director Ortiz?
No.
Chairman Barclay?
No.
Director Requejo?
Yes, unmute him,
You're
sir.
on mute, Director Requejo.
Sorry about that. No questions.
Director Lee? Let's move on.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to item agenda 6, which is the review of an ordinance approving the fiscal years 2025 through 2029 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and execution of grant. Who has to take their glasses off to read? And execution of grant and cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. Tom?
That was the one that I covered.
Oh, that was 6?
Should be.
Oh, I'm sorry, then we're on 7.
Hold on.
Oh, no.
That was 5 and
That was,
5 and 6, right? The capital program.
Okay.
The one was an amendment and the next is the new 5-year program.
that's it. Okay. So with that, may I now have leave to place all 3, which is one package on the omnibus for board approval.
For the record, that's agenda items 4, 5, and 6.
4, 5, and 6, correct.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that agenda items number 4, 5, and 6 be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Requejo,
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes.
All right. Okay, so, and since there are no further business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus and recommend the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that the omnibus be approved, be placed. That's the omnibus being. That the board recommend the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja. Yes. Director Ortiz. Yes. Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Requejo.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Yeah, that's late. And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn before that? Thank you so much for being patient, everyone. Thank you very much. All right, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that the Finance Audit and Budget Committee meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja.
Yes.
Director Ortiz.
Yes.
Chairman Barclay.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Requejo.
Yes.
Director Lee.
Yes.
Leah say, she's saying yes, it's typed on the screen.
It's typed on the screen that she said yes. The motion passes.
Then we are adjourned. Can we just take a bio break real quick? Great.
Morning. I
Morning.
would like to call to order the meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for November 2024. Georgette, please call the roll.
Director Ja,
Here.
Director Ortiz,
Here.
Chairman Barclay,
Here.
Director Jakes.
Here. The chair recognizes Director Ortiz.
Thank you. Chairman Barkley, I move that Director Roberto Requejo be allowed to participate in the meeting remotely due to a work commitment that prevents him from participating in person.
A second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that Director Roberto Requejo be permitted to participate in the meeting remotely. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz,
Yes.
Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Director Akeo, you are allowed to participate in this meeting virtually. Welcome. Our
Thank
next
you.
order of business is the approval of the minutes for the regular board meeting of October 9th, 2024. May I have a motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that the regular board minutes from October 9th, 2024 be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja,
Yes.
Director Ortiz, Chairman Barclay,
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Director Requejo.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next item of business on the agenda will be the Citizens Advisory Board report, which will be given by Katanya Raby, who is the chair of the CTA Citizens Advisory Board.
Actually, Chairman Barclay, Tanya Raby was unable to join us, and we have with us today our vice chair from the Citizens Advisory Board, Mr. Rob Johnson.
Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Hello. Morning, Chairman Barclay, President Carter, members of the CTA Transit Board, and all of our attendants today. My name is Rob Johnson. I'm the vice chairperson of the Citizens Advisory Board. Happy to be here today to report the activities of the Citizen Advisory Board for the second and third quarter. During our September 6th meeting, we kicked the meeting off with a moment of silence in recognition of the tragic shootings of the 4 passengers on the Forest Park branch of the Blue Line. Afterwards, we heard a presentation by Bill Mooney, CTA's Chief of Infrastructure, on the Red Line Extension project. During the, I'm sorry. And then after that presentation, it was a very good presentation, very lively discussion, very informative. And I think he answered every question presented, in fact, shared a lot of interesting new information to me as well, which I'm happy to expand upon should you guys be interested. After the presentation, we also finalized a survey of the board members regarding their interests and which subcommittees we would like to serve on for the balance of our term. And the 3 areas that resonated the most were safety, service planning, and delivery and innovation. On our October 18th meeting, it was the focus of that meeting was the 2025 budget. We were presented a presentation by Chief Financial Officer Tom McCone, along with staff persons Lisa Smith, Jeff Overcat. Very healthy discussion, very spirited discussion. He answered many of the technical details and technical questions we had. I think a lot of the focus was on safety and security. And the increase in the line items for those, along with beyond just the line item impact, also exploring other programming choices we could make to bolster either the actual safety security, the perception of safety security. We know that they both impact ridership on the system. But community-based, using, community-based tools like violence interrupters, transit ambassadors. There was even a request to explore a dedicated transit police force, the impact of that on the budget versus the current, I think it's an IGA arrangement with CPD or with the city. I think it's also probably not a surprise that the other big item was not 2025, but the budget challenges faced in 2026. And, the role that, the needed revenue will be gained by, whether it be by the transit board itself, the state legislature, perhaps even federal. I think time since that meeting and today, we could probably imagine that concern is only heightened. So, but again, the focus of that presentation was on the 2025. Thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Are there any questions for Mr. Johnson? Director Ja?
Did you have any specific asks coming out? Like, do you have a list of what are there items that that you're tracking in terms of asks or recommendation
For the
team, for the CTA team,
for the red line extension or for the budget?
for the budget?
I think the most concrete ask, there was a lot of questions. I will tip my hat to Mr. McComb. I think he answered a lot of them quite well. I think the biggest ask were exploration of different programming options for safety and security. That's the one that's kind of out there. There's the understanding that what we're looking for is information, not necessarily an affirmative, right? But other than that, I think that's the concrete ask that's out there. Sure.
Thank you.
Director Ortiz?
No, I think we're in alignment when you heard the conversation that just happened as well. And if you didn't, I invite you to listen to it. So I think there's a lot of alignment in what you share and the expressed opinions as well in that conversation. So thank you for your report. Thank you for your time.
Director Jakes?
Just thanks, man.
Director Lee?
Thank you for your time and commitment to this, and we share your love for the CTA as well as wanting to see it change and get better.
Director Requejo?
Yes, thank you, and no questions from my end.
And I'd like to express a thank you to Mr. Johnson for taking time out. He actually has a hard 12 o'clock meeting that he's trying to make. So he gave a bit of an abbreviated report and we are very grateful for it. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next order of business is public comments, Georgette.
Mr. Chairman, we have, I believe, 5 public comments. Patricia Fuentes, Diego Frostro, Michael Overstreet, Antoine Tremuel, Jeffrey Collard, Vice President of Operations at Haymarket Center, and Sam Bardino, Director of the Homeless Outreach Program at Thresholds. I would like to say thank you to those who are public commenters who are here today and to advise you that you have 3 minutes to make your comment. And I will call up first Ms. Patricia Fuentes.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Puente. Thank you for listening to me and thank you for letting me be here. I have a concern. I don't have complaints. I have concerns. My concern is that I have a picture right here that last time that I came to the meeting said that people, the attendants, your employees are sitting on the things that turn around. This time I had to take a picture because they keep on doing it. And, just in your training, can you just please tell them, then that's not a share? Then they break down, then you guys have to fix it, money's go there. And you guys, this one you could keep. The other thing is, thank you very much. I speak a lot. I speak to a lot of people from the airports that come to visit Chicago. They're very happy with the transportation, but the CTA, they said that Chicago is improving a lot. They haven't been here for years, like 10, 15 years, and now that they're back, they're really content, and they're even thinking on coming back. I just wanted to let you know what they say. The other thing is the attendings. They're just on their phones. They're employees. Are they allowed just to be on their phones? You have a question, and when you go up to them and ask them a question, they get upset. They get bothered, and then they treat you bad. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are they paying you to be on your phones? The other thing is, what was it? Cell phones. I noticed, thank you very much. I noticed that the cell phones, especially with the Hispanics, when they were having it very loud, now they're not. I don't know, maybe somebody spoke to their community and told them, please don't have your cell phones, your music very loud. I'm very protective. Because I'm a person that will go up to them and tell them, can you please lower your music? We're not in a party and nobody likes the same music. But I'm really content that it's really, low. Sorry, and the other thing is,
Seconds.
okay, CTAs, buses, they're driving too fast.
That's time.
They're
Thank you
driving too fast.
very much.
Okay,
Have a great day.
thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey Collard, Vice President of Operations of Haymarket Center.
Thank you. Do you know what?
Okay, you can, thank you.
Morning, Mr. Chair, board members, President Carter. My name is Jeffrey Collard. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Haymarket Center, which is Chicago's largest center treating individuals for substance use disorders, mental health, and primary health conditions. We serve 10,000 people per year, the majority of whom are experiencing or have a history of homelessness. Almost all of them have no resources or are on Medicaid. The very first service at Haymarket when we were founded 49 years ago was outreach to individuals experiencing homelessness. And we have followed that mission ever since, while expanding into a full continuum of treatment, support, and follow-up. We've partnered with the Chicago Department of Family and Support Services, DFSS, for many years on projects to provide outreach to unhoused individuals at O'Hare Airport, as well as in community areas. In the past 2 years, we have worked on the outreach project on the CTA Blue Line. Haymarket teams work in 2 shifts, 7 days a week. The teams encounter individuals both on the trains themselves and at and around stations, with particular attention to hotspots. The project's goals are to triage people experiencing homelessness out of the CTA and into appropriate services and ultimately to housing. In February this year, we were honored to have Mayor Brandon Johnson join us for an evening ride all the way out to O'Hare to see at firsthand the good work of our outreach staff. From February of 2023 through September of 2024, Haymarket Blue Line outreach workers documented almost 13,000 encounters with individuals. The services they provide include food, hygiene, clothing, case management, access to substance use or mental health treatment, harm reduction such as overdose reversing Narcan, and fentanyl test strips, and many more activities. Our staff have even provided an overdose reversal on a CTA platform. 89 individuals were successfully placed into stable or permanent housing, and 340 were entered into the coordinated entry system, which can help them gain access to housing. All activities are regularly reported to the CTA. Haymarket outreach workers have also participated in 2 accelerated moving events, which you heard about in the previous Finance Committee meeting. From Haymarket's point of view, the project has been a model public-private partnership with close, careful oversight by CTA and DFSS. Haymarket is committed to providing the best quality services and to meeting the needs of CTA ongoingly as those needs may evolve. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Our next comment will come from Sam Gardino, Director of the Homeless Outreach Program at Threshold.
On behalf of Threshold, on the behalf of many unsheltered CTA riders. I really appreciate the board and President Carter and his staff enthusiastic support of this IGA, which, as Jeff said, has been a model of partnership and all kinds of levels of cooperation. Special thanks to Tom McCone, Gloria De Castro, and your operations people for making this truly effective, being a very effective partners. Thresholds is one of Illinois' largest providers of mental health services, and like Haymarket, we've been on the ground for many, many decades providing these services to our most vulnerable folks. By the way, involving Threshold and Haymarket was a terrific idea with two agencies with a long-standing track record who knew how to do this work. I just want to talk for about one person who wasn't, I don't think is on your personal story list. And when we were sitting here last year having this conversation, he was living at the North and Clybourne Red Line stop. And I'm going to mention that through this partnership involving CTA ops people, involving Thresholds outreach people, involving DFSS, involving extra resources we could provide around Martin Luther King weekend last year, we had a very bad cold snap involving that and being able to get him off the streets and out of the station quickly when it was life-threatening for him. So he, right now, despite a lot of physical and mental health challenges, he's got 8 months of permanent stable housing with services attached to it. I want to emphasize that. That's just one name, one person behind these numbers, which in the world of outreach and outreach to people who are unhoused, these numbers are large, and each number represents hours and hours of people effort, of measurable staff effort to work with these folks to help them shelter, housing, and other things, and medical care, which has been crucial. The medical care linkages we have made, I think you can see in one of the personal stories there, and couldn't do it without this agreement, without this partnership. It's been 2 years of large impact, and we expect to be able to make even larger impacts, and working in a very tough environment, economically, in terms of what resources are available and the kind of support people need.
5 seconds.
So I'm really glad that you guys are on board. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe our last commentator is Diego Frostro.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to present today. My intention is to present a snapshot of the CTA from a resident and taxpayer and somebody who truly loves Chicago. The last 4 years, unfortunately, I've seen a significant deterioration in service, especially when it comes to health and safety. To be honest, security is a joke. Nearly 95% of the time said security is on their phone, on TikTok, on Instagram. It's actually very infuriating to have to walk past that every single day. Sometimes they don't look up. It seems like, what's the point of having them? I've asked them what their job is, and I've complained about smokers and people smoking marijuana on the train where there's, pregnant women and children having to be subject to that. And they've told me that their job is not to enforce that, and that they're there for, in case my safety is at risk, they would call the cops. So they're telling me that they wouldn't even come in to my help if I needed any help. I don't understand what they're there. I don't understand the dogs, the canines are muzzled. What's the point of having a canine that's muzzled? That's not going to do anything to prevent somebody at risk. There's nobody who enforces smoking. That's terribly disgusting. And I've gone out of my way to tell people to stop. And sometimes it works, surprisingly. And sometimes they just look at me, and obviously I'm not going to get in an unsafe situation. Bird poop is out of control at the Belmont station. The stairs are always disgusting. I now go to Diversity instead since I have the ability to go to both. The Blue Line, I haven't taken in over a year because the stench was just amazingly terrible. There continues to be homeless problem. And Ms. Jot, to your point, I'm sure that a lot of people don't report this. So if they're saying oh yeah, we're only getting one report a day, well, it's just because people perhaps don't have the time to report. And the bus service from Lakeview to downtown is mostly efficient and clean. I usually take the 146, 151. I've noted how buses now can give exact change, which is great. And the drivers are mostly courteous and polite. So I do commend the CTA on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of these electric buses as they hopefully take over more of the city. Thanks for listening. As a taxpayer, I want to make sure that we have a world-class CTA and that we have the potential to be a world-class city going forward. Thanks, everybody.
Is Michael Overstreet here from Amalgamated Transit Union 308?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Overstreet. I have served CTA since 2007, both as a rail supervisor and an executive board member of the ATU Local 308. For these roles, I see daily the safety challenges that CTA workers and the public encounter. Our workers in every classification face dangerous situations regularly, and they need meaningful backup and support from security personnel who are equipped and prepared to respond effectively when situations demand it. The current safety measures are simply not enough to ensure our workers can perform their duties confidently and go home safely at the end of their shifts. And so the public feels safe riding our system. We need robust, effective security enhancements. Under the requirements of the bipartisan infrastructure law and Federal Transit Administration Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, transit agencies in large urbanized areas are required to form a safety committee that operates on a joint labor management basis. This committee is responsible for approving and continuously evaluating the safety plans, recommending risk mitigations, and ensuring that necessary safety actions are not only identified but effectively implemented. This is not a recommendation. It is a federal mandate tied directly to CTA's federal funding. Yet, despite these requirements, labor's critical concerns and recommendations continue to go unaddressed. This includes our input on newly awarded security contracts and the ongoing need for stronger support and resources in the field. It is imperative that labor and management work together to protect CTA's workforce and the communities that we serve. And this cannot happen if labor voice is not actively included in every stage of safety planning and implementation. Our goal is simple: to see decisive, immediate action on those concerns and to assure a safe environment for every worker and passenger. We ask for your support in addressing these needs and upholding the commitment to safety that CTA workers and riders deserve. Thank you for your commitment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Overstreet.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure Antoine Tremuel.
Good afternoon. My name is Antoine Tremuel, and I've been employed at CTA for over 23 years. Currently a bus operator on the Chicago Avenue location. Also as well, I'm a union rep and part of the safety bipartisan teams. I appear before you today just to address a pressing issue of concern for not me, but for my fellow bus operators employed by CTA and the riding public as well. The issue of safety on mass transit, or lack thereof, the issue goes to the very heart of mass transit, which provides necessary service to our riders, communities, and efficient mass transit system. It is important, but without a safe transit system in play, people in the community will hesitate to ride on the CTA system. Service is mainly for reliable transit. We know that a majority of people who live in the city are entirely dependent on the system for basic needs like going to work, school, shopping, medical needs, or even venture out. There should not be an option included in the service. One thing I want to say about this, collectively, I'm listening to you guys, and this is my first time actually appearing at a board meeting. As an operator, I hear the things, but we need more vocal input. Service security is terrible. We do not want another group of individuals who on a bus with a yellow vest looking and just saying you're getting off. You're taking up space. We would rather have our own police department. Someone that's proficient in there. We need a response time. We need things that's actively and engaging us as operators. The riding public needs it as well. We're in a situation where no one wants to take the service. Everyone is scared. I've been attacked physically and verbally. And I'm no exception to the rule. But the response time is crazy. Could you imagine a person attacking you and saying, I'm not going to leave. I'll wait because I know police is not coming. That's the life that we live right now. And it's terrible. It's terrible. No one should leave out their house in fear of working just to provide for their family. No one should fear out of their house and just going to the store and have to be worried about someone attacking you because you want to go to the next block or you want to provide for your family. We need a drastic approach now. Also, you have an ambassador program and a transit program that you're getting. I just took the class and it's terrible. You're doing more harm than good. The things that you're giving is the false facade of reality. The things that you did 30 years ago, you cannot do today. Change must be made, and it needs to be made efficiently and effective. That's all I have to say today.
Thank you, Mr. Tremue. Chairman Barclay, there are no further public commenting.
Thank you, Georgette. Our next item of business on the agenda is our president's report. President Carter.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take a moment to at least discuss somewhat the service improvements that we made as we're coming to the end of the calendar year. At the beginning of this year, I made certain commitments about what we were going to do with regards to our service, both on bus and rail. And I am pleased to report that we have recently added another 20% of more service hours to our rail systems, which with that addition puts us in line with what I promised at the beginning of the year would be a return to pre-pandemic levels of service by the end of 2024. However, we're providing more rail service, but the rail service is only viable in at least 96% of our scheduled service on a regular basis. Specifically, just last week, the first 4 weeks since implementation of the new fall rail schedule, CTA provided 93.2% of the scheduled service, which is comparable to the 93.5% that we delivered in 2019 during pre-pandemic times. However, during that same period of time, we delivered 1,920 average daily trips, which is 41 more trips than the 1,879 average daily trips that we provided in 2019. So we're providing more service at the same level we provided pre-pandemic. That commitment was important to me at the beginning of the year. And to the comments that the chairman made earlier, there were a lot of people who didn't think we were going to be able to do that. On the bus side of the house, we made that commitment and achieved those commitments earlier in the year. As the chairman indicated, we hired over 1,000 bus operators. We've continued that hiring process, and we are now in a position where we are fully staffed with our bus service, our bus operators. And on the rail side of the house, by the end of this year, we will met the goal of hiring 200 or training 200 more additional system providers. I also want to point out that our budget is basically looking to continue this trend going into next year. Our future looks very promising. We will continue to add additional rail service and bus service going into next year. We're going to be looking at ways in which we can modify that service to reflect the future ridership trends that we're seeing for our riding public. And overall, that along with the capital investment that we're going to be making makes 2025 a really promising year for us going forward. We're going to continue to do our rail overhauls. We're going to complete the first phase of Red Purple modernization. We're going to basically begin construction of the Red Line extension. We're going to construct a new operations control training center. We're also going to be obviously expanding those contractual and job opportunities that come from all the capital project investments that we're going to be making. The bottom line is that it's a very exciting time to be at CTA. There's a lot of progress that we're making on a lot of important issues that matter to us. That is not to say that we don't have headwinds that we need to deal with. The portion of that we've spent a good deal of time talking about today. We also have the fiscal cliff that's looming that we need to address. But having said that, we're certainly laying the foundation for the things that we want to accomplish going forward and into the future. We're certainly putting ourselves in a position to allow us to achieve the type of quality services that we want to provide to our customers as we continue to address the challenges that we need to get to the world-class transit system that, as one of our commenters said, the city deserves in order to be a world-class city. I've cut my remarks fairly short because I know we've gone way over time here, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have on my remarks and the issues that we discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, President Carter. First, I want to thank you and the team for the budget process. I know that can be a challenging process. Thank you for also being receptive response to some concerns that we raised here this morning. As you know, most critical issue facing CTA, as far as the board is concerned, the highest priority right now is security and safety. We want our passengers to feel safe. We want our riders, everyone is concerned about security at this point. And so it's not just safety for our passengers, but it's safety for our employees as well. This is an important area. And I was glad that Mr. McCone and your staff adjusted the budget to reflect some pilot projects that we're going to engage to basically make sure that we bring that into fruition. I want to also, as I indicated earlier, thank you for the other things that in terms of the red line extension, those things sort of did not get covered this morning when we were talking about the budget capital improvement program, which has been strong and CTA continues to focus on quality of service, accessibility and those kinds of things. How we really focus on this morning. But I just want to emphasize that, you know, we're pleased that ridership is increasing and things seem to be moving in the right direction. But we're not pleased with the security, as we indicated, and we want to see improvement in that area. We want to see innovative things and things that are just practical that can help get us there. We know some of the challenges that you're facing, but we want to let you know that we support any effort that's going to increase security and make it better for the citizens of Chicago. Thank you. Anyone else with comments?
Yes, I want to commend all the great milestones that you shared. They're not simple and they're not small. So thank you to you, President Carter, and to the entire team that has been working to the milestones that were just noted. So thank you to everyone. Thank you, President Carter.
Director Jakes?
Because I don't know the answer. The concerns that our employees bring forth, who do they talk to and where do these ideas go? So that it doesn't seem as if it's falling on deaf ears.
First of all, I just want to clarify, CTA has established a joint labor committee. And the individuals, I'm sorry, the joint labor committee that I mentioned by one of the individual commenters, that committee has been established and has been meeting regularly. And these are topics that get discussed in those meetings, for which we work to identify solutions that will be beneficial to both our employees as well as the broader concerns that have been raised with our customers. I think it's also, as was indicated, the creation of this committee was mandated by federal requirements. The reason it was mandated is because the problem that we're seeing occur in Chicago is occurring throughout the entire industry. It wasn't just CTA that got told to create these committees. Every transit agency got told to create them. The first of those committees is to basically engage a dialogue with our employees on ways in which we can effectively address the safety and security concerns of our employees. And that dialogue is continuing. So to short answer your question is that is a form in which those concerns get heard. There are also town halls, rap sessions, and other things that occur out at our facilities for our employees to talk about these concerns, in which our security team or the police department tend to give feedback. And in many cases, strategies that are implemented come out of those discussions with our employees. The challenge, I don't know what the square miles are of the city of Chicago, but the challenge is we have a geographic, spread of operations and the randomness of crime that makes whatever we do always, as we discussed earlier today, an ongoing challenge for which we have to continue to work on finding new and additional strategies to address it. But there are forums and there are ways in which those conversations are had in which our employees could get to talk to us about that. And we'll continue to look at ways to further expand and explore those conversations as we move forward.
So you may not know this, President Carter, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. With the Joint Labor Committee, is that information trickling down to the reason that it involves both the employee union representative and naturally so it can trickle down. And to be clear, the employees who work on this are not like union officers at the top level of the hierarchy. They're frontline employees. And the idea is to get their input into these issues and to have these conversations. I guess you'd have to talk to the employees about how much they talk about what happens there. Certainly there are things that have come out of that have obviously been beneficial to our employees. But the work of this committee, just to be clear, it's just starting. These committees were just created this year. They haven't been ongoing for a long period of time. And their meetings can be challenging to pull together. But we're going to continue to do that. There are plans that we have to put together that have to be approved by this committee that impact our funding, our receipt of federal dollars. So it is taken seriously by my team and the work that we need to do. And out of those plans are going to come actionable items that obviously can be addressed as we move forward. Thank you.
Director Lee?
I'm not going to rehash everything that was said, but want to echo the sentiment that I too am hopeful for 2025, hoping that we can really make a lot of headway into the things we've discussed today. And I know we can do it together because CTA is a strong, resilient, and Chicago is a strong and resilient place. So I have faith in authority.
Director Requejo?
Thank you, President Carter, for your report. I refer back to our prior agenda item where we shared some of the things that we like about the budget and some of the concerns we have. And I will just take this opportunity just to reiterate how important it is as we look at budget resources 2025 to look at our human infrastructure, our in-house capacity to engage the public. I know we have equity and engagement officer and team. I think we need to double down on those resources to make sure we reach out to all the partners who are banging at the door and saying, we want to help you, we want to be part of your strategy. And also building on the public commenters and the general conversation today, I don't want to talk about just security. I would like to have the security conversation within the larger umbrella of customer experience, right? What does a customer experience when they enter a train station, when they enter a bus stop? And I'll say from my perspective as a writer, I experienced very different types of experiences depending on who is in charge of that station, at that bus. And it's a full spectrum, right? From incredibly helpful, proactive, dedicated folks to folks who, as one of the public commenters mentioned, make it look like you are bothering them by asking a question, right? So I think having a bit more capacity on those verticals of the org chart, customer experience vertical, the community engagement team would help us a lot, especially moving into 2025. And then a question to you, because I know this is an issue you have mentioned several times, and I'm really excited about it, is what would it look like for CTA to have a proactive and inspiring equitable transit-oriented development strategy, which I know last time we talked about this, you say it's a chicken and egg situation, right? We don't have a capacity in-house right now to develop such plan, but we need the plan to inspire Springfield to give you the powers that you need to co-develop or to be a joint developer and more. So as we think about 2025, we're going to have to persuade a lot of legislators, a lot of advocates, a lot of folks that we should double down and triple down on funding and support the CTA. Again, what would it look like to have that strategy in place that we could wow the world and say, hey, CTA is not only going to be a transportation agency of choice and a global reference on that, but also we are going to move more strongly into the world of developing or co-developing with others the properties that we own and also the adjacent lots and building to our growing bus routes and train stops.
I'm happy to follow up with the board on that issue. I think you're correct that our ETOD strategy in many cases has been very project focused around certain activities of CTA as opposed to a broader sort of case what we could do if given certain tools and authorities, and that certainly needs to be a part of our broader advocacy strategy as we continue to go down to Springfield to get the tools that we need to ultimately ensure the financial stability of the agency in the future.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is number 6, executive session. Kent, it's my understanding that we're going to defer session today.
Correct, Chairman.
Does that require a vote?
No.
Thank you. Now move on to the board and item number 7, board matters. Georgette, do we have any board matters today?
Mr. Chairman, there are no board matters on the agenda for today.
Our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Jakes.
Chairman, the committee met earlier this morning and approved the October 9th, 2024 committee minutes and reviewed the finance report. Committee reviewed 7 ordinances. 1 is the review of an ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2025 and financial plan for calendar years 2026 and 2027. A review of an ordinance amending ordinance 023-131, approving the fiscal years 2024 through 2028 capital improvement program. Review of an ordinance approving the fiscal years 2025 through 2029 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and execution of grant, cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. Review of an ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of 1 or more supplemental indentures under which the CTA may issue 1 or more series of corporate purpose debt obligations payable from the sales tax receipt fund and authorizing the issuance of sales tax receipts revenue refunding bond series 2024. Review of an ordinance authorizing the 4th Amendment to an antenna site license agreement with GRE-GOGO Orrington Owner LLC for the operation of the authority's communication equipment located at 1603 Orrington Avenue, Evanston, Illinois. Review of an ordinance authorizing a development agreement with JRTC Holdings LLC, a partial release, additional grant, and amendment to an easement with JRTC Holdings LLC and an amendment to an agreement for construction, operation, and maintenance of a fixed facility with JRTC Holdings LLC and the city of Chicago for the renovation, operation, and maintenance of the CTA Clark Lake Station at the former Thompson Center, State of Illinois Center Building, Chicago. View of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Chicago through its Department of Family and Support Services for outreach to individuals in need of shelter. The committee also reviewed 7 contracts. The committee placed the 7 ordinances and 7 of the contracts on the omnibus. Committee approved and recommended for board approval 7 ordinances and 7 contracts. Concludes the report of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee.
Thank you, Director Jakes. I will now entertain a motion to approve the omnibus.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that the omnibus be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
Director Rakeo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Our next order of business is the construction report from Bill Mooney, our Chief Infrastructure Officer, and Juan Pablo Prieto, that's Director of Diversity Programs.
Good morning, Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and I'm joined by
Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs.
We are here with your monthly construction program update. Move forward to our first project we've been beginning for the last few months. This is our Canal, Tie House, and Barry Damon substations. The project proceeds forward on schedule and on budget. We are looking to bring Damon online, which will be the first of the new facilities to come online towards the tail portion of this year. So here's the first set of photos. So we actually brought in all the new Trex power equipment in the facility. We've had the opportunity now to start wiring it up. So they'll be looking to kind of bring that commissioning forward in the next upcoming months. This facility comes online shortly thereafter. So this one comes online towards the end of the year. At Damon, I'm at Barry. We are working towards making this facility watertight for the winter. So at this point, they're working on their closures. Here you can see the glass enclosure. Is really kind of the trademark architectural feature of this new substation. On the exterior, this glass wall gets added a series of terracotta panes that makes it look like a lantern as it glows at night. It's a really, really neat feature, but the real goal here is to get the facility completely buttoned up so that we can get that equipment started to get loaded in this fall and start its commissioning process and bring this one on in the spring. And here you can see some of the recent work we've talked about underground on Belmont, on Barry and Kimball here. We were bringing in the major traction ComEd lines into the facility. We're bringing in the sewer, we're bringing in water. So we've done the repaving before that season ends here, restoring the street in the neighborhood. And then kind of on that picture on the right side of the screen. So this is actually a multi-story substation. It goes up to and it goes down to. And so all the drainage for the facility gets collected in the sub basement and gets a bit major ejector pump and shot out to the sewer level above. So here you can see them building in that injector pump. And in the subway at the Canal Tie House, they're finishing up kind of all the final wiring and connections here. They've been working on the connections up to the green line and the completion kind of the last punch list items over at Haymarket, which is really the tie feed for this facility. And they're working on the commissioning in the near term. We should hopefully see this one brought online towards the end of the year as well. Forward to Western on the Brown Line, we have closed out kind of our last of major platform closures here. The goal was to do the other restoration. A couple months ago, I showed you the outbound platform work that was going on with the rebuilt platform edge, all the touch point, the concrete work there, as well as the painting. Here is the before picture of the canopy before the painting that's occurred. Here's some of the after work here. So you can see them painting the interior roof there, as well as the major beams for that canopy and all the columns and railings and everything else. Here you can see kind of the rebuild. This is again, on the concrete edge here. So this is a place we see a ton of deterioration just because it's cantilevered edge over the edge. It gets a lot of water residue there. And so it deteriorates, becomes a structural concern. So this was completely removed and reformed and repoured. So you can see that work going on. This is kind of the top finishing. So once this top surface is finished, they install back that blue tactile warning strip. Moving on to our Harlem bus bridge improvements. This has been really exciting. So we have a ton of structure on our system, but we don't often do true bridge projects. It's much more common for someone like IDOT. And so it's been a really interesting project for us to take on. So here you can see the fully removed all the span work in that area. This is kind of looking north towards the station. So this will be the one connection point that kind of lands into the middle where the station is. And then there's another connection that brings kind of the bus turnaround around. This is the center beam point. So in preparation for the new steel to come in, we actually had to restore all the existing columns that are part of the station elements that will hold that beam. So you can see that preparation work there. This is actually over the live platform. So there's a bunch of shielding around this work that's occurring to protect our customers as we still are providing service. And then on the two edges on those abutments, so we actually are pulling back off the highway with creating a little longer span to get us out of the footprint of the highway a little more. That means that we had to beef up the abutment pretty significantly. I've shown you a lot of the excavation and preparation work here. So here they are performing that abutment. So this ultimately becomes one end of the bridge. It lands in the center beam that I was showing you and then picks up the other span of that bridge. We're under our Racine Station and Morgan Substation Improvement Project. Project's moving along very aggressively at this point. So here you are looking at the Racine Station House from kind of across the highway. It is fully enclosed at this point with exterior walls being built up. It's being sealed up and then it will start to get prefabricated cladding. That really is a signature piece of it. It's a kind of a broad white cladding that goes with it. Here you can see one of the key architectural features I've talked about a couple of times. That is the waterfall stairwell. So this is full glass enclosure that comes from this multi-story facility, rolls on down. So you can see that on the right, as well as the windows that open up as you kind of come through that main mezzanine for the station. Here is the platform extension. So this platform extension was what was added on to be able to facilitate the elevator. This facility does get a brand new elevator as part of our ASAP program improvements. So it gets a new elevator that provided access to that platform and then the connection point with that stairwell as well. And on the other portion, major portion of this project, Morgan Substation, it continues to grow up out of the ground. It is unique in our only elevated substation that we've ever built like this above the highway here. And so you can see actually the walls, the ceiling, both floors of the substation. The roof is enclosed. They have built most of the exterior wall at this point. They removed a lot of the shoring around the substation in a recent closure and they're starting to get prepped for all the interior work that goes with getting this ready to be able to start taking equipment. As we come to kind of the end of the season, we continue to charge forward, refresh and renew as we're on target to make our 29 of 29 stations with 24 complete and 12 of the 14 bus turnarounds. We expect to have them all completed as promised by the end of the year. Some of the highlights from the program. We did a floor rehab like this at Conservatory on the Green Line 2 years ago in the program. It came out really well. They took it on at Kedzie here on the Pink Line. I think it looks phenomenal. I think it's one of the better kind of impacts we've done on these stations. And these older historical stations were required to reuse the wood as part of the agreements around them. So they wear very differently, especially in the Chicago weather and all the foot traffic. And so you can see on the before how beat up that floor is and what the refreshed version on the after is. So it's pretty impressive. Here is the exterior, our kind of prototypical lighting upgrades that make a big impact, not only on the station itself and that sense of feeling of security in the station, but on that walk up to the station, the area around it. Here's Ridgeline on the Green Line. So this is scheduled in our ASAP program for an upgrade in the upcoming couple of years, part of our capital investment there. And so, but you're seeing in that short-term commitment, just a refresh that we continue to do on all these stations as we work on other projects. And here's before after kind of from the exterior. Again, you see what the impact of the LED lighting does on the overall footprint of the station. Sedgwick on the Brown Line, you can see the before on the one platform, the after on the other with the upgrade there. And here's our one of our more recent bus turnaround projects. So this Division Austin, you can see kind of the touch up on the curb line, refresh painting on all the high safety features there. This is 47th customer waiting shelter there. So pretty big, significant improvement in that area as well. Then kind of the employee facing facility side at Austin and Jackson. So you've seen a lot of these as we've touched on these comfort facilities for our employees, being able to kind of hit them with the same level of attention we're giving our customer employee facing stuff. Purple modernization keeps chugging along. It's been a really exciting couple months as we see the stations continue to evolve. So on the southern portion of the project, this is the Red Purple Bypass. You can see the noise wall installation here. This is on the new tracks 3 and 4. We're getting ready to put them in service in the early part of next year. And we've got a couple phased outages that helps facilitate the crossover work. We've been showing you some work on out there, but here they are prepping the noise walls. This is actually below that area where we have our substation. So this is building a new yard wall. So this will be an ornamental wall that wraps around the substation that faces the public. At Hollywood, this is the farthest advanced portion of the station project. So like most of the north end on the Lawrence Bryn Mawr stretch, we work north to south. Hollywood being the farthest north entrance, so it is the most advanced and it's already getting elevators. So I showed you kind of the tower work and the steel work going on. So here they're putting in the cladding and starting to put in the equipment for that elevator. And it's also got a granite floor already installed. So it's really, the stations are really evolving fast. And as you work further south, you see different portions of it. Here at Berwyn, you see them starting to set the canopy infrastructure there. So this would be a new translucent canopy, shelter our customers as they wait for trains. Here at Argyle, you can see the exterior of those walls are fully formed in for that station. And now they've started to fully enclose it. Then as you move to Lawrence, you can kind of see again that phasing as you go further south as they're prepping the floor for the pour here. So, Lawrence is by far the furthest behind, but it's planned in the schedule at this point. Again, they kind of sequentially, and unlike a lot of the structural elements, which we did in phase A already. So we built all that structure. We built the track once before. We've commissioned the signal system. The stations are new this time. So this is actually a new portion of this phase. So they're learning a lot of lessons on Bryn Mawr, which is the furthest north station as they do things, and they're getting applied. And so they're able to gain ground on some of these ladder stations with those best practices that they're learning as they're building them on the north side. So it's really interesting to watch. And we quickly are coming to the end of the segmental box construction. So we're very excited to kind of see this historic moment come to the end. It's a huge milestone to kind of end with the bridge building here. So here's kind of the last span of segments in preparation for installation, just south of Lawrence. Our ongoing outreach continues with the 44th Ward, 46th Ward, 48th Ward. We've been doing a lot of outreach with the local community organizations, the chambers, touching base kind of on our open for business campaigns, doing updates in the project tour, talking about kind of the near-term future. This project is coming into the home stretch in the year ahead. It's been a very interesting experience to be a part of. It's an amazing team that's been able to deliver something really interesting. And so it's an ongoing celebration kind of with the community as they're seeing these minor milestones. They see the pavement coming up to completion as they're seeing those stations come up, and being able to share that with them is always exciting. That I'll turn over to Juan Pablo.
Bill, through the design and construction packages, 119 unique DBE firms have been awarded over $286 million. 54 of those firms are new to CTA, and the contractor is on track to meet their DBE goal. The next slide, you'll see that over 2,400 unique workers have logged over 2 million labor hours and earned over $120 million. The contractor is making aggressive strides in collaboration with CTA's workforce partners to meet their workforce goals. Slide. There's a few events that I wanted to cover with you all that we've done in the months of September and October. In September, we held our Q3 workforce outreach event at the Columbus Park Refectory, where 56 attendees networked with 22 different exhibitors that range from labor unions to workforce assist agencies, contractors to try and find their career in construction. Our Q3 DBE outreach event was held at Gately Park on September 19th, where 45 small businesses networked with 21 different prime and potential prime contractors. They also heard presentations from our CTA infrastructure and red line extension teams about upcoming opportunities through their programs. We held the first of many red line extension events at Olive Harvey on September 25th, where our prime contractor Walsh Vinci presented their plan for their DBE participation. Over 100 DBEs came to hear the presentation and network with both the design and the construction teams to start building those relationships. And we had our assist agencies host tables as well for those DBEs that needed any assistance through them. If you flip to the next slide, in October, we started and graduated 6 firms through our small business educational series, which is some professional services firms. This is for firms like security, landscaping, janitorial, so they can learn how to do business with CTA and pursue that work. We also held a second citywide career fair in partnership with the City Clerk's Office, Civilian Office of Police Accountability, and City College of Chicago at Olive Harvey on October 10th. We had 644 attendees come to network with 55 different employers. It was a great success. Had a lot of individuals come and say that this was the best career fair that they had been to because we were connecting them directly with jobs that we know of. We know there were 3 on-site hires made, and we're following up with the employers to see if they've made other offers or had other interviews. We plan to continue doing these twice a year to bring the employers, and these are non-construction employers. We're focused on other opportunities outside of construction because we've heard feedback from the community that they don't just want construction jobs, which is what we typically bring with our outreach events. So we've partnered with others to bring non-construction jobs for the community. And then finally, we started our road shows for the Red Line Extension, where we go back to the membership meetings of our assist agencies. We went earlier last year where we announced the shortlisted firms to tell them that the Red Line Extension was coming. Now we're coming back since we awarded the contract with the contractor so that they can present their plan. So we've done 2 so far with the Federation of Women Contractors and Black Contractors, Owners, and Executives. That concludes our report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you didn't ask me about this, but I thought it was important for me to inform the board that obviously with the results from the election last week, we are very focused on making sure that we get the grant agreement completed for the Red Line Extension before the end of this administration. We are in the final phases of that process. We're working very closely with FTA to complete their portion of the review process so that we can stay on track to execute a grant agreement between now and early next year before this administration leaves.
And that is important. Thank you for sharing. Let us know if there are anything that we can do.
I will.
You should be commended for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On that same vein, I'm wondering if we should be proactive at understanding MBE and other DBE changes that may come as a result of that. So happy to take any thoughts on that.
You have reason to be concerned. Not just because of the administration, but also because of some recent Supreme Court rulings that have occurred that have not been very favorable for the existing DBE program and have even challenged the Department of Transportation's DBE program, which is still working its way through the courts. One of the reasons why one of the co-chairs of Equity Infrastructure Project is that it's being viewed as an alternative approach to how we might be able to still maintain the type of expectations that we have around exclusivity on our contracts, even if the federal program, as we understand it, were to fail. We have other options at CTA, particularly given the position that the state of Illinois takes and some of the other legal options that we have to pursue that. But I think it's safe to say that race-based and race-conscious diversity programs right now are under severe attack. And what the future holds for the existence of those programs or how they're going to look could change dramatically in the upcoming years, quite honestly, regardless of which administration's in place. I will add, though, the administration that's in place does have an impact on those issues for policy and other standpoint, and certainly could have an impact on our overall strategies as we go forward. For now, we continue to aggressively enforce our goals. We tend to be very aggressive in our approach to identifying the appropriate race-conscious and race-neutral options that we have on all of our contracts, in full compliance with all the regulatory and legal requirements that are in place until those requirements change. And I know Juan Pablo and his staff are very committed to that, and certainly the message that we're sending out to the contracting community that we still have the same expectations around their commitments to these programs, both on the contracting side, but also on the workforce development side, that we've spent, as you know, many years putting in place, and are very proud of having one of the more preeminent programs in the country supporting those types of activities.
Thank you.
I want to commend you on, I know I was out south at House of Hope, I think in September. So people were willing to sign the pledge that they're committed, private sector companies, that they're committed to basically doing the right thing, as well as public agencies as well, under the law. I mean, I get it, but that was really tremendous to see some of the heads of Fortune 500 companies come to the table and say, regardless of what happens, they still have a commitment to maintain diversity. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, all right. Thank you. Our final order of business is new business. Georgette, is there any new business?
Mr. Chairman, there's no new business.
Since there's no further business to come before the board, I have a motion to adjourn Chicago Transit Board meeting, November 13th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Ortiz, seconded by Director Ja, that the meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Ja?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Lee?
Yes.
And Director Rakeo?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, your motion passes.
Thank you. Have a great day.